April 25th, 2023. This meeting is being held in person and may be live available on broadcast on Channel 18. Members of the public with an interest in any portion or specific item on the agenda should plan, obviously, to be in person. If you're not here in person, please come in person. Also, I just want to call this meeting to order with especially noting that according to Mass General Law, anyone who intends to record this meeting must first notify the chair, who will then inform the other attendees at the start of the meeting. Is there anybody here who cares to or wishes to or plans to record this meeting? Okay, no, thank you. Would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And before I go ahead with the meeting, the hearings this evening, I wanted to just take a moment to announce the passing of a former dedicated public servant, erstwhile chairman of the planning board, Larry Brophy, who passed away recently. I don't know if many of the people here know of Larry's work, but he was instrumental over the course of several decades in spearheading initiatives and bringing kind of a professionalism to this board and to the department, and he will be sorely missed. So with that, we start this evening with public hearing case number PB 2023-12, which is continued from the 11th of this month. Karen and George Oliver of Oliver Homes LLC, through their agent Kent Druschella, have applied for a special permit for an alternate access driveway. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Sections 325-18K, and Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9. Property is located at 86 Mile Street, Assessor's Map 14, Parcel B9. Property is located within the residential RL zoning district. This case is being heard in conjunction with case number PB 2023-04, which is continued both from February 28th and from April 11th. Karen and George Oliver of Oliver Homes LLC, through their agent Kent Druschella, have applied for a special permit for a two-family dwelling in order to build a second residential structure connected by a roof or series of roofs. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Chapter 325-51N, in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9. Property is located at 86 Mile Street, Assessor's Map 14, Parcel B9. The property is located in the RL zoning district. I would like to ask Paul, do you think we have how would you like to, did you have any comments you want to make before we open this up?
No, sir. I'd like to have the applicant have the case first.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. My name is Charles Sabat. I'm an attorney with an office in Hyannis, and I'm here with Mr. Druschella, and as well as Thad Eldridge, who is the registered land surveyor on this project, who prepared the plans. As you know, Mr. Druschella made a presentation on the application for the special permit pertaining to the two-family dwelling that was continued to, I think, 2 weeks ago, and then continued again to tonight. And he also has filed the application for the alternate access driveway. So I note that they're being considered in conjunction with one another. Since your first presentation, and I know you had presentation on the merits on this matter from Mr. Druschella, but since that time, there's been a letter that's been filed with you that's, I think, some 18 or 19 pages in length, that makes a number of legal arguments. And what I would like to do with the board's permission is I would like to just recapitulate very briefly on the main special permit, which is the two-family dwelling permit, then address as succinctly as I can, and I think I can do it fairly succinctly, this letter that has been submitted by counsel for those that are in opposition, and then thirdly, make a few points in addition to what has been presented previously with respect to that particular petition, and then address the petition that refers to the alternate access. So if that is acceptable, I would like to proceed in that way without trying to repeat or overdo what has already been presented. So we are here tonight on behalf of the property owner, which is Oliver Homes LLC. The special permit that is being sought is for a two-family dwelling. And as you know, the criteria for that under 325-51N by this planning board, the criteria are that the lot area must contain a minimum of 40,000 square feet, which this lot does. It's about 47,560 square feet. The floor area of each dwelling unit shall be a minimum of 800 square feet, which each is. The main house the existing house is approximately 2,800 square feet, and the proposed dwelling, new dwelling will be approximately the same, a little bit more at 2,900 feet. There must be a common roof or series of roofs that connect the dwelling units. And as you know, or may recall from the plans, there is a series of roofs that do exactly that. One roof will run from the existing house out to a cabana, which is a pool cabana, which has one wall on the back, and it's open on the other sides, but has a roof, and then another roof will run from that to the proposed second dwelling. I know that much has been made about the fact that the title is held by a limited liability company, but this is a family-owned venture, and I can tell you that limited liability companies are now being used as a common estate planning device. At one time, we used to use nominee trusts or real estate trusts, and there's been a change in estate planning methodology now whereby people are typically using LLCs, limited liability companies, in lieu of a trust. So this is not necessarily, or doesn't mean that this is a commercial venture or a business venture, which I know has been mentioned here in opposition previously, and I think was implied in the letter that you received. So this is the Oliver family. They are the owners or the members of this LLC. They intend to use these two dwelling units for their family. And in fact, I think it was represented to you, which is the case, that one of their family members, a young child, is disabled, and they look to the future, and they want the second dwelling unit to be available for independent living for this child when she becomes an adult. They have been using the house for family use in the summertime. They have not rented it out. They don't have any intention of selling it. The current structure was constructed in 2014. They've owned it for 9 years. They've used it themselves for 9 years, or they've had family members that have used it for 9 years. They don't intend to change that. This is not going to be a commercial venture. The proposed second unit will be 2 stories with 3 bedrooms and a garage. When we finish this project, if permitted, the lot coverage will be 12.7%. It is currently a little bit over 6%. The required lot coverage is 15%. That's the maximum. So this proposal falls beneath the maximum coverage for a development in this area. You can look to other, and you're required to look for a special permit to other conditions, which is under 325-51A. And one of the findings that you may look at is whether or not the use as developed will not adversely affect the neighborhood. The other criteria under A, 325-51A, whether the specific site is an appropriate location for such use, structure, or condition. C, whether there will be a nuisance or serious hazard, and D, effectively whether the sewage treatment facilities are adequate. So let me take the easy one first, which is D, which is if you look at the plan, there are 2 separate septic systems that are proposed. The septic system that will be compliant and adequate for the proposed second dwelling, With respect to the adverse use on the neighborhood, this is a consistent use. It is residential use. At most, there will be, in terms of vehicles, which we'll address with respect to the access issue, at most, one can foresee 2 passenger vehicles at most that'll be accessing the second dwelling, and maybe the occasional service vehicle. That's it. This is not a situation where we're looking at multifamily housing with a number of apartments, or we're looking at a change of use that's commercial, where there's likely to be some adverse effect on the neighborhood. In this case, there will be almost no impact or no change of impact in the neighborhood. In terms of the specific site, it's been pointed out by the opposition, and I have to stress, this is one of the largest lots in the immediate area. If you look at all of the other lots in the area, they're far below the size of this lot, which is which is over an acre, some 47,000 square feet. And when, if this is permitted, when this project is completed, the density of the property will be less than, or at least consistent with, and in many cases less than some of the existing density on the street. And if I may, we prepared a chart showing all of the homes on Grassy Pond Road, a number of properties on most of the homes on Miles Street, and some other related areas. And you can see all of the densities. If I may just distribute this to the board.
Please.
As a chalk, so that you can take a look at this. So if you look at this chart, and the green highlights are not of any relevance, it's just the way they're printed out. We took this data, was taken off of assessor's records. And you look down and you can see 86 Miles Street, Oliver Homes LLC. Now that shows the current lot coverage of 6.7%. So that's going to increase to some 12%. Assuming that this is permitted and the units are in fact developed. But if you just run down this list, you can see in Grassy Pond Road, for example, there are some high densities. So we see 15.5, 24, 24%, 20%, et cetera. Look at some of the properties on Miles Street. You can see some larger densities of some 16, I think, oh, that's Keenway is 16%. Miles Street is 71, 69 is 18%. You've got 76 Miles Street is 17%, and so on. There are densities that are lower, for sure, but there are a number of densities that are significantly higher. Look at 92, 96, and 98 Miles Street. You're going to see 22%, 23%, and then I think it's 102, see 20% lot coverage. This to me is the significant number, what's the relationship of the proposed structure, the proposed development, to the size of the lot. And remember that these structures also will be toward the rear of the property. They'll be orienting out toward the golf course. There are no residences behind there. It's open space. It's a golf course. They'll be set back. The second dwelling unit will be set further back from Miles Street than the current main house. So I would suggest to you that the density of this project as proposed is far less than what we find in a number of the other homes. And I would point out that the 4 opponents who submitted this letter to you, if we look at their properties, at 4 Grassy Pond, for example, it's 15.4% coverage. 10 Grassy Pond Road is 20% lot coverage. And then 37 and 41 are one is 15.7 and one is 15.5. So the densities of those homes are higher than they are with this proposed development. The other thing I would point out to you is that on Miles Street itself, we were able to identify at least 3 other properties that have second dwelling units on them. This was at 116 Miles Street, 124 Miles Street, either have an apartment or some other, each has a separate unit of some kind. If you look on the assessor's records, you can see that. And these are not connected by, these are pre-existing non-conforming, I would assume. They're not connected by any common roof lines. They're separate units. 134 Miles Street, which is under development at this point, if you look at the proposed plans, they're proposing a bedroom over a detached structure, which is a cabana-type structure at their swimming pool. I don't see a plan for a common roof, so I imagine that they don't have cooking facilities, but the point is that they have a separate bedroom, sleeping quarters on that site. So what we're proposing here is not an anomaly in the area. In fact, on this site itself, when my clients purchased this property, there was a house and a detached garage, and the detached garage had an apartment in it. So the history of this site is that there were 2 dwelling units on it before they were raised in 2014 and the current structure was constructed. So in summary, on my review of what has been presented to you here, this is, the use is not changing. It's residential. That's a permitted use. I submit to you that there's not going to be any increase in traffic at all. This is all, again, 2 passenger vehicles at most. There's no evidence of any nuisance or hazard that's going to be created. This is going to be used by the family, by family members. There's no intention to rent this out or make this an Airbnb or anything of that nature. And the septic systems are appropriate for the proposed use. Let me turn, if I can, to this letter that was submitted to you that in opposition from the 4 neighbors. And there are 8 pages or so that are devoted to an argument relating to a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And as best as I can understand that argument, what is being contended there is that the main house is a pre-existing non-conforming structure, and that in order to expand or alter the structure by adding on this additional proposed dwelling unit, they're telling us that this project needs to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals for what we call a Section 6 finding, that it will not be more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing nonconformities. And they rely upon a 2008 decision that came out of the, actually started in the land court, in which the appellate courts determined that when a pre-existing non-conforming structure is expanded substantially, then it must go to the Zoning Board of Appeals for a determination as to whether or not that's an appropriate expansion. So there is one fatal flaw in that argument that really vitiates the entire argument and really is totally inapplicable to the facts of this case and does not in any way whatsoever warrant that this be sent to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And that fatal flaw is that the main structure is not a pre-existing non-conforming structure. It is a conforming structure. It was constructed as a matter of right pursuant to a building permit that was issued in 2014, 9 years ago, and some 6 years after the decision from the appeals court that's referenced in the letter that was submitted to you. And so that means that the entire argument simply fails. In fact, this particular construction was allowed under your zoning bylaw, which is section 325-54, which, And the specific subsection is 7, and it says that a pre-existing non-conforming structure, and that would have been, in 2014, the original home and the garage that pre-existed there, a pre-existing non-conforming structure other than a single or two-family residential structure may be altered or extended by right if the building official determines that it meets the following criteria. And that is that the extension will conform to current setbacks and that the nonconformance concerns the lot in question or the frontage of said lot. So the building commissioner issued a building permit in 2014, issued a demolition permit, first of all, to demolish the pre-existing structures, then issued a building permit for the current structure. So that structure exists as a matter of right and does not a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And in fact, the Supreme Judicial Court has said, and I'm quoting it, this was a 1968 decision, Cullen versus the building inspector of North Attleboro. I won't give you the full citation. I can if you want it, but they said a non-conforming building is one that is erected prior to the enactment of the zoning bylaw. This house, the main house, was constructed after the current zoning bylaw in compliance with the current zoning bylaw. So it is not a pre-existing non-conforming structure. And all of this discussion about the expansion and the alteration and all of these other arguments that are made simply do not apply here. We are here under a specific special permit bylaw that empowers you to review, and that is the two-family dwelling special permit application. And in fact, the zoning bylaw in Harwich, the section that I just reviewed, 325-54, what in effect undermines or responds to or replaces the requirements of the decision that is referenced in their letter. And that decision is the 2008 decision, which is the Borkland versus Zoning Board of Appeals case. That's the case that they're discussing in here about the home that was built that was significantly larger than the pre-existing. In other words, it was a McMansion that was being constructed. That's all been addressed by section 325-54 because the town zoning bylaw has carefully laid out when a structure may be expanded as a matter of right. In fact, I have to apologize. I quoted the wrong section. I meant to quote number 4, which reads, a lawfully pre-existing non-conforming single or two-family residential structure may by right be demolished and replaced with a new structure on the same site, provided that it will conform to current setbacks and coverage for the zoning district and the non-conformance concerns size of the lot in question or frontage of said lot. So it was under number 4 that the building commissioner clearly issued the permit in 2014. So all of those first 8 pages about sending this thing to the Zoning Board of Appeals and so on and so forth is utterly inapplicable. The second argument that I'd like to address in the memorandum or the letter that was submitted to you goes to the issue of the two-family question of the two-family dwelling, and they seem to be arguing that, if I'm understanding it correctly, that somehow or other you cannot have two dwelling units that are connected by a series of roofs, which is completely contrary to what the bylaw itself says. And they attempt to do that by analyzing the definition of dwelling two-family. And I read this a little differently, and the definition of a dwelling two-family is a building containing two dwelling units whether side by side, over each other, so we have upstairs, downstairs, or you have a duplex, or in any other combination, provided that there is a common roof or a series of roofs connecting the dwelling units. And I would have put another comma in here, but the phrase "in any other combination" is referring to the two dwelling units in that sentence. So it implicitly reads, or two dwelling units in any other combination, provided that there is a common roof or a series of roofs connecting the dwelling units. Because otherwise this wouldn't make any sense. What other combination could you possibly have unless you have something that's connected by a series of roofs? A dwelling unit itself, as is pointed out in this memorandum in opposition, is a building or portion thereof consisting of one or more rooms containing cooking and sanitary facilities, etc. So a dwelling unit can be a building, which is exactly what we have in this case. We have a dwelling unit that is a building that will be connected by a series of roofs, which is the very explicit language of the bylaw that we are under, which is, I think, is subsection N, which we're here under. And so this bylaw that has empowered you to pass on whether or not a permit should be issued has specifically carved out and created the possibility of a two-family dwelling. And one final point on this, and that is that it's interesting if you look at the definition of building in your bylaw, which was not mentioned in the opposition. It says a combination of any materials, whether portable or fixed, having a roof or similar covering to form a structure for the shelter of persons, animals, or property. It's very broad, and it's broad for a reason, so that your building commissioner can make somebody move a structure that's in violation of setback. So this is a very broad definition, and what I notice is missing is there's no reference to windows, there's no reference to entrances or exits in this. So I could have 4 posts and a roof, and as long as I'm using it to shelter humans or property or whatever it may be, that's a building under your bylaw. And that to me is relevant because the series of roofs that we have, and that's why someone wrote this with series of roofs, and given this definition, really is an extension of the building, because that's how broad the definition of building is in this bylaw. So I would submit to you that argument that somehow or other having 2 distinct dwelling units is not consistent with the definitions is just wrong. And it's not even consistent with, that argument's not consistent with the very definitions that are in the special permit section that we are here under tonight. One final thing I would like to say on that issue, the issue again of densities, and I don't want to beat a dead horse on this, but if you look at appendix number 1 that they submitted here, somehow or other this was submitted with respect to the issue of the alternate access. And I think what they were trying to argue is that the lots on Grassy Pond Road are very dense, or there's dense population there because those lots are small and this lot is big. But what I noticed is they gave you the averages of lot size and lot coverage, and actually it's living space, not lot coverage in this particular chart. But I thought this was interesting too, and another telling number. And if you look at Grassy Pond and you look at what the percentage of living space to lot size is, you get 15.45%, almost 15.5%. You look at Miles Street, the number comes out to 12.56%, and based on their numbers for 86 miles, it's 11.86%. So the proposed living space in this development at 86 is actually less than the average of the other homes in the area. Now, one thing, this gives the wrong figure of 51,400. I assume they took this off the assessor's records. In terms of the area of 86, it's really 47,000 some odd. And if I use that number, I get 12.82%. So a little higher than the average, slightly higher than the average on Miles Street, but still in the ballpark. I thought that was a telling item. And I said a minute ago this was the final point, but I was a little dishonest. I've got one other thought on this, and that is that if you look at one of the issues that's been brought up here is this effort that was made in 2014 to divide this property into two separate lots and to create two separate houses. And that was a failed effort. It was withdrawn, and there's been no effort to pursue it. In fact, the current house was built after that proposal was withdrawn. And that was a flawed effort because it was just inappropriate under Chapter 41, the subdivision control law, and it was appropriately withdrawn. And I was just going to submit to you that the reason I think that your bylaw provides for having this series of routes to connect individual or independent dwelling units is to protect against that very thing, namely somebody coming in later on and saying, I have two separate dwelling units and now I want to divide this on some theory, variance or whatever it may be. And by requiring that they be connected, which will be the case here, that militates against and I think precludes that type of an effort later on because you've effectively created one continuous building. Let me go now to the access question. And let me suggest this, and I hope you can follow me here for a minute. There's a proposition of zoning that says that if you request zoning relief, you are deemed to have required it. So if you come in and you ask for something, then you're barred later on from arguing if you need to somewhere else that you never needed the relief in the first place. So in order to protect yourself on that, you have to reserve your rights on that issue. So without antagonizing everyone here on this issue, when I look at this access issue bylaw, I read this to be saying that you are required to apply for a special permit when you don't use legal frontage, when you're using an access that is not legal frontage, and not when you're seeking a subsidiary or secondary access. Having said, and so I want to reserve our rights on that particular issue, that we may not be required to have a special permit at all. So having said that, I'd like to put that on the shelf and leave that as a footnote. The town and the town planner obviously interpret this to mean that when you have an existing access from the legal frontage and you want to have another one, an alternate access, then you need to come in for a special permit. So let me address that. And the definition of frontage, by the way, in the bylaw is the boundary of a lot coinciding with a road, street, or way as defined in this bylaw. And interestingly enough, there is no term legal frontage anywhere, at least that I could find in the bylaw. But I interpret that to mean not legal frontage in the sense that it's frontage that complies with the required minimum frontage, but it's the frontage that you use to determine setback, because front yard setback is often different than side yard setback or rear yard setback. So that's what I think is meant by required legal frontage. So in our case, Miles Street has been used as the required legal frontage. And we are seeking as an alternate access, to use the terminology here, access from Grassy Pond. And the three criteria for this under the special permit are that the alternate access proposed is superior to the access along the legal frontage, that the proposed alternate access is cleared to a minimum of 16 feet in width and 16 feet in height, which we are. The frontage on Grassy Pond is some 23 feet, and the driveway that is proposed, in fact, there's an existing driveway there, which I'll come back to in a second, would be 16 feet in width and 16 feet in height. There's no trees or anything of that nature that's going to prevent an emergency vehicle from getting access. And then thirdly, when access is proposed from an easement across another lot, which is not the case here, the lot providing the easement will have the required legal frontage, et cetera. So the real issue here is whether or not the alternate access is superior to the access along the legal frontage. That's really the issue here. And I would submit to you that it is superior as an alternate, because if you approve the second dwelling unit under the first application, then you know from the plan that the garage orients toward Grassy Pond. Now, clearly, we could redesign the driveways internally to get access to the second dwelling unit, but certainly it would be a superior access internally to be able to access the garage from Grassy Pond. And in terms of the external issues, in terms of superiority of access, I would say that Miles Street is a more heavily traveled street than Grassy Pond is. And if you now are going to create a situation where the 1 or 2 passenger vehicles that will be accessing the second dwelling unit can access from an alternate location, namely from Grassy Pond, then you're minimizing the number of vehicles that are going to be exiting onto Miles Street and the number of vehicles that are going to be turning into Miles Street. So if we don't have the alternate access, you're going to have a maximum of 4 vehicles, maybe more, coming in and out of Miles Street. If we allow the alternate access, we've reduced that potential number, and 2 of the vehicles, if there are 2, and there could maybe only going to be 1, are going to access from Grassy Pond. The other thing is, Mr. Druschilla pointed out to me that there are a number of landscapers that routinely service the homes along Miles Street. And Miles Street's a relatively narrow street. And when their trucks and trailers are out on the street, it tends to create some obstacles to people driving by. So in this case, if we have the alternate access, if a landscape or other service vehicle has to come to the property, they can use that entrance. They can park there in the driveway. They're off the street, and in that sense, it's a superior access. In terms of the opposition, there was an argument made, if I'm following it correctly, that because of the high density in Grassy Pond, somehow or other, the introduction of additional vehicles is going to be detrimental. And I note that there are 17 lots that are on Grassy Pond, and if everybody has 2 cars, that's 34 cars. And what we're proposing is 1 dwelling unit that would access onto Grassy Pond, at most 2 vehicles, and maybe the occasional service vehicle. So now we would go from 34 to either 35 or 36. So I would suggest that when you put it into perspective, the impact on that roadway is not really substantial. And remember, as one exits 86 miles onto Grassy Pond, right next door to you is the golf course. So the entire length to the left of when you're exiting is going to be a golf course. You're not really intersecting or interfering with anyone. So I would just suggest to you that again, this is not a situation where you've got a proposal for a commercial property that's going to be exiting out into a residential area. That would be problematic. This is residential use, exiting out into a residential area. The number of vehicles will be minimal. And so I would suggest that that the applicant would meet the criteria here. One final thing, and I think this is my final thought on this, and that is that there was a photograph in this letter showing some ponding or puddling on the neighbor's driveway. And there's been no engineering study on this, but I can tell you that the driveway that accesses our lot at 86 miles actually slopes downward into the property. And so, and that's sand, and that's a permeable surface where water would penetrate and stay on our site. And the puddle that I'm looking at in that photograph would be coming from the hardtop surface of the roadway and running onto this neighbor's property. So I would suggest to you that it's not the existing driveway that's creating the problem, and certainly we can address that with appropriate drainage. We've got a professional land surveyor here with us, and we've got professionals that we use, and we will be using, and we can address that very easily with a catch basin or whatever it might be on site. And that driveway, there's some criticism in this opposition that it's shown or referenced as existing, and a surveyor has to show all topographical features that exist on site. And so he's accurately shown this as an existing driveway. And that was constructed, by the way, with a permit from the local DPW. And they didn't know, and neither did Mr. Druschella know or think that a special permit might be required when he applied for that. So to his credit, he did what he thought was the right thing, went to the DPW, they granted the permit for that driveway, and it was cut in, and that's why it's existing today. So I don't know that I can make it any more complicated than that. And that is our presentation, and I would like the opportunity to rebut if there is going to be, I assume there'll be some opposition to that.
Great.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there any questions, comments from the board at this time? No? All right, well, thank you very much. I understand that the opposing group has counsel,
They did good.
and so I think we'd like to hear from counsel first. Thank you. Thank you all.
All right. I guess shall we leave the table and let them?
Probably that might be the best
Okay.
thing.
Good evening. My name is Victoria Dalmas. I'm an attorney with Senni and Associates, 15 Cape Lane in Brewster. And I represent 4 Grassy Pond neighborhood residents, parties and interests, Kathleen Hagan, Peter Pendergast, Patty Smith, and Tom Simpson. So it is our position that what is proposed is a second single-family residence, not a 2-family dwelling, on a single lot of approximately 47,565 square feet, having non-conforming frontage, thus is a lawful pre-existing non-conforming scenario by virtue of the non-conforming frontage. Zoning bylaw section 325-18 provides, in all districts where single-family dwellings are permitted, no more than 1 such dwelling shall be allowed on a lot. What's proposed here is a new nonconformity requiring a variance. It's not a 2-family dwelling, it's a second single-family residence. Regarding 2-family dwellings, what is proposed is not roofing connected or in a series over the building in which the 2-family dwelling units are contained, but rather is 2 buildings, each containing a dwelling unit, with a series of interposed connected structures, themselves not the building in which the dwelling units are contained. It's a very different concept than a 2-family dwelling. And to find otherwise would run contrary to the zoning bylaw, comprise bad precedent, and erode predictability of the zoning law. In other words, any town 40,000 square foot lot will be eligible to seek this kind of relief. Another way to look at what's proposed is under the property's protected status, and I do disagree with counsel, respectfully. The protected status as a lawful pre-existing non-conforming improved lot. The proposal's validity does require analysis, in my view, under the Section 6 finding, assuming it's even eligible for the Section 6 finding. And the Section 6 finding, as I'm sure all of you are very familiar, is the not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing lawful use. The Section 6 finding is really only applicable when you have an alteration or an extension of a structure in this kind of a scenario. And that's not really what's happening. This is an entirely new residence being built on this property as a second home, as I mentioned, with the interposed structures. It's a new nonconformity based on zoning bylaw section 325-18. I do also believe there's a jurisdiction issue. Zoning bylaw section 325-51N on two-family dwellings, of course, is in, the additional criteria is within the special permitting authority of the planning board. But clearly, when you have a lawful pre-existing non-conforming scenario, that is in the special permitting authority of the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I also disagree. What is proposed will have a meaningful impact on density, particularly in view of the Grassy Pond neighborhood being comprised of substantially undersized lots. So what I'm hearing here is, just because everyone around me is lawful pre-existing non-conforming, therefore I get to do it too. But all of those extremely densely developed properties are lawful pre-existing non-conforming. This is the situation where you have someone who wants to create essentially an overly dense development. And of course, density is a significant concern that's protected under the zoning bylaw. It's associated also with overcrowding and open space considerations, protections of view, privacy, and of course, valuation. The applicant's request for an alternative access driveway, we also believe is without merit. At its core, the alternative access concept, in our view, rests on a need, not a desire. And any hardship here has been self-created by the development at the property to date. The request also is essentially for an additional, not an alternative driveway, as if a new lot is interposed in the Grassy Pond neighborhood subdivision. And as my brother counsel has mentioned, the applicant has indeed essentially attempted this previously and withdrew that application. The superiority of the legal, of the access is indeed, I think, the key criteria of relevance. And quantitatively and qualitatively, clearly Miles Street is superior. Miles Street, not Grassy Pond Road, first of all, is the legal frontage for this property. Quantitatively, the Miles Street frontage is 127.66 feet as compared to the 22.58 feet off Grassy Pond Road. Grassy Pond Road also already serves, as my brother counsel mentioned, as sole frontage access for 17 extremely densely developed lots. And you'll hear from neighborhood residents regarding the qualitative impacts. Grassy Pond Road is comparatively a smaller road than Miles Street, and it's essentially a cul-de-sac with distinct curvature points and lines of sight. So it's really quite different and quantitatively and qualitatively superior. So to close, on behalf of my clients, we respectfully request that this board not approve these special permits. And I do believe the applicant should be allowed to withdraw without prejudice and return with a more modest proposal, perhaps involving an accessory apartment, which it sounds like the two examples, at least two of the examples that he's mentioned in the neighborhood, are more in the vein of an accessory apartment, or return with the proper two-family dwelling. I mean, in our view, really what's being requested here, there is a remedy for it, and that is to propose a warrant to amend the zoning bylaw. I'll just lastly add that I've mentioned I disagree with my brother counsel's analysis. When you have a lot, whether it's undersized or its frontage is non-conforming, you fall within the universe of lawful pre-existing non-conforming. He cited to a 1968 decision. I haven't read it. He had 2 weeks to read my letter. I do know that in 1975, the Massachusetts Zoning Act was substantially overhauled. So I don't even know if that case actually takes into account the 1975 changes. So with that, I think that's all that I wanted to say. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the board? Not yet? Yeah. So I think it's time to hear from Mr. Halkiotis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There are two cases currently in front of the board being somewhat combined and looked at. One, the special permit site plan application for a second dwelling connected to the existing dwelling. And the board had received substantial testimony back at the first hearing on February 28th. The board had received over 20 letters, predominantly from residents of Grassy Pond Road, in opposition to the project. Since the February 28th hearing, the board has not received any additional information from the applicant on that application. There was discussion on the 28th about the 2013 Board of Appeals case where the property owner had applied for a frontage variance with the intent to divide the lot, and as was stated, that was withdrawn. Since the last hearing, the board didn't receive any additional comments from interested parties beyond the 20 letters of opposition that are in the file. With regard to the adequate access application, the board received an additional new group of letters, about 20 in opposition to the proposed alternate access special permit. And the board did receive the brief from Attorney Dalmas, which he just reviewed. As the board's aware, in order to take action on these special permit applications, you need to make a series of findings. And those are spelled out in the review memo that I provided to the board. That's all I have.
Very good. So I would open it up again to the board for questions, comments, deliberations. At this point. Please.
Mr. Chairman, if I'm interpreting what we've just heard correctly, we just had two different opinions as to whether the property was pre-existing non-conforming. And to me, that, I can't say that I am able to decide which argument would be, if one is accurate and one isn't accurate, which would be more accurate and which wouldn't be. So without knowing that, that's a pretty important basis for some of the opposition and for the opposition to the opposition. And I would have a hard time without knowing more about that from an interpretation of the bylaws and maybe a legal opinion from the town. It would be hard for me tonight to be able to say with a lot of certainty that I am convinced about one or the other interpretation of that very important tenet. So I'm kind of
Thank you for that
stuck.
excellent summary of the dilemma this evening, at least from our point of view. I think there's, very clear language on both perspectives. Mr. Halkiotis, do we have a fallback position for this?
The board could continue the hearing tonight and provide the two briefs to town council and ask for some guidance. I think that it's important to deal with the question of whether or not this application is properly before the planning board. We heard some convincing arguments that it is properly in front of the planning board. And I'll tell you that when these applications come in, I carefully review what they're requesting, the particular sections of the bylaw that they're applying under. And in this case, I looked at the table of use regulations, and it said that this use, a second home connected by a series of roofs, is allowed in this residential rural zoning district with a special permit from the planning board. And then that section refers back to section 55N and 51N, and it provides the decision criteria and the findings that the planning board has to make under that particular section of the bylaw. And so when I gave the initial review of this, the table of use, allowing this by special permit from the planning board was clear, and it connected directly to this other section, and that was clear what's required. The analysis that was made that this is a non-conforming scenario, it's important that people understand that the term non-conforming can mean a non-conforming use, a non-conforming structure, or a non-conforming lot, and a non-conforming lot can be non-conforming with respect to the area, the frontage, or setback requirements. And so that characterizing this as a non-conforming scenario is a broad brush. And I think the opposing counsel made the distinction that the structure itself was conforming. Having said all that, these are legal terms. There's case law being presented to the board to analyze, and it's complicated for all of us. And so following up on Harry's comment, at this point, it may be prudent for the planning board to vote to continue the public hearing and direct me to send the briefs that were submitted, and any other, we would allow the council to submit anything else in addition within the next few days, and I could send that to Copeland and Page and seek some guidance for the planning board based on what those two opposing briefs say.
Mr. Chadwick?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there any value to reaching out to the zoning board or chairman of the zoning board to see if they've had any experience in this type of situation in the past? Or would that be covered by referring it to town council?
So the zoning board would not be the right place to ask that question. The building commissioner serves as the zoning enforcement officer and the final determination on zoning questions. And so we could seek advice from Jack May, the building commissioner, or go to council, but not the Board of Appeals. They would not be the appropriate entity to make a decision like that.
Would it be advisable to do both rather than one or the other?
I think that would be a good idea. And we've had some conversations with the building commissioner about this already.
Thank you.
Sounds like a prudent path. I mean, just to cover all the bases, and I would want to express, do we need a motion to go ahead with this?
I would recommend
Okay.
that
Can I have a motion to do this? Unless we have any divergence of opinions here? Because I think this prudence is the order.
I mean, there's
Mr.
no,
Peterson?
Mr. Chairman, there's no like time constraints here. There's no like,
no.
Warrant articles.
yeah.
So I'd like to entertain a motion to that effect.
Make a motion, do we need a date certain to continue to?
Probably our next meeting, which is,
May 9th.
May
From the
9th.
council?
m-
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please.
if I may, and
Yes, of course.
perhaps you could make it part of your motion. I did not submit a brief, or so-called, anything in writing, so I'd like the, if it's gonna be referred.
Absolutely.
It's gonna be referred to the building commissioner or the town council, I'd like the opportunity to do that. So if you give me some time to do that, I would appreciate that.
Absolutely. And Counselor Dalmas, that goes for you if you want to amend, adjust, bone up on that 68 law.
Thank you so much. I would appreciate to see that brief, just as he had time to see mine,
Absolutely.
and then the opportunity to respond to that brief.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes sense. And I also, before we go ahead, I want to thank the people and residents and neighbors that turned out and submitted letters. 2 rounds of this. This is a great example of how the process works. I'm really very happy to see the participation this evening, and I want to thank you all. You've been heard. We have an ample stack of documents. We all get to see this, and we want to proceed at pace. We've had a couple of errors over time, and we just want to do this the right way. So let's entertain this motion,
Shayla, do
and
we?
May 9th?
Next meeting,
May 9?
May 9th? Is that acceptable?
But that's an assumption that we can get the town council to respond by then.
That's acceptable to both councils?
Yes, that's acceptable to the applicant.
Okay.
Thank you. And let's just want to make one other thing. David Harris, are you with us? I know you're probably muted, but I don't see him up, and I'm not seeing any
DH, second line,
PH.
4 over.
Yeah, I don't see any or hear any notification. I want to make sure that David is heard. All right, so let's go ahead.
Okay. Make a motion to continue the public hearing for case PB 2023-04 and PB 2023-06 until,
No, it's 12 and 4.
oh, I'm sorry, yep. 12 and 4. To May 9th, no earlier than 6:30 PM.
Have a motion, I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. We'll do a roll call vote, and we'll end with David, so you'll be amply notified. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody,
Emily Brady, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Alan Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick,
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Ray Munns,
Harry Munz, aye.
David Harris. Abstain or nothing, right? Duncan Berry, aye. So the motion carries. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Appreciate your attendance. We move on right now to case PB 2023-06, which is continued from March 14th and April 11th. Eastwards Companies has applied for a modification to an approved definitive subdivision plan known as Dorset Drive, Assessors Map 98, parcels B1-1, B1-2, and B1-3. The proposed modification would reconfigure Lot 2 with compliant frontage and create one panhandle lot, reducing the length of the road and conveying one lot to an abutter. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 400-11C. Properties are located in the Rural Residential RR and Drinking Water Resources Protection District, DWRPD zoning districts. Gentlemen, see you again.
Good evening, David Clark, Clark Engineering on behalf of Eastwood Companies. Bill Morris, from Eastwood Companies. Last time we were here,
And Susan Ledoux is with us on Zoom.
Hello.
Hello, Susan.
there were questions regarding the adequacy of the 14-foot wide way. We did receive correspondence from the fire chief. So we proceeded with that was favorable, so we proceeded with the 14-foot wide way. There was also questions from the town's engineering consultant on the stormwater report. After a couple of back and forths, we resolved all the issues with that. So at this point, if any board members have questions on the revisions that were made, I'd be happy to answer them.
Anything from the board?
I do not.
Nope. It looks like the material that was received in February, I'm trying to get to the most recent one, okay. So Paul, in your memorandum, did you have any additional adjustments to make on this? I see that, I can't see a date on it.
The
Since.
March 7th,
Since
excuse
the
me.
March 14th public hearing, the board has received additional revised plans and stormwater management report, a letter dated April 7th from Susan Ledoux, letter dated March 29th from Susan Ledoux, and the board received a letter dated March 27th from the Board of Health. The revised plans, stormwater study was sent to the planning board's consulting engineer at VHB. They've reviewed that, there was some back and forth, and they have indicated that, that they're satisfied with the design of the stormwater management system. I'm satisfied that they've addressed my concerns. The board is gonna need to vote on the waiver requests, and then take a vote on the requested modification of the subdivision plan.
Okay. And do we have a, I'm trying to see if we have a set of stipulations for motions to that effect that we can use to generate a motion.
So the, my memo to the board dated April 20th,
Yeah.
on page 2, lists the waiver request,
Okay,
and the board will need to vote on those two waiver requests. And since this is a subdivision and not a special permit application, there's not a series of findings related to a special permit. It's you know, for a subdivision.
okay. So it sounds to me, so is there further questions following that report? So I think we can get a motion based on the waiver requests 1 and 2 on page 2 of the April 20th memorandum from the planner. Mr. Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion that we approve the waivers the applicant has requested for this, under the subdivision of land and site plan special permits. Number 1, plan scale at 1 inch equals 80 feet instead of the required 1 inch equals 40 feet. And number 2, reduce pavement width from the required 20 feet wide to 14 feet wide.
Any further discussion? David Harris?
David Harrison, I thought you were on the second.
Whether, I just want to make sure there's any, yeah, I do want to, I would just want to make sure that you're acknowledged. If you have any comments here.
No, I have no comments, but I think before discussion, you need a second.
Oh, absolutely. All right, can I get a second? Sorry. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. We have a motion and a second. Now, Mr. Harris.
I have no questions.
Okay, very good. But thank you for the formalities. So observed. Any further discussion? I say we go with a roll call vote. Ms. Tucker?
Ann Tucker, aye.
Ms. Britty?
Emily Brady, aye.
Mr. Peterson?
Alan Peterson, aye.
Mr. Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Mr. Munns?
Harry Munns, aye.
Mr. Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye. That was pretty easy. And do we have, it's just simply the waivers? Is that the bulk of the matter? We're done?
After the waivers have been dispensed of, which they have, then the board would need to take a vote to approve the modified subdivision plan, and if we could get the date of that plan to include in the motion. It's dated March, I'm having trouble seeing this.
March 7th?
March 6th with a final revision date of April 6th, is that correct?
Okay. I don't know if I've got
So-
that. So I'll make sure I get the proper input.
What was the date?
I guess the original date was February 3rd with a final revision date of April 6th, 2023. And this is plan prepared for Eastwood Homes Business Trust for Dorset Drive.
You got it, go ahead.
Got it. If you want to go, because I don't have it.
Make a motion to approve the modified subdivision plan.
Oh, I do.
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
Mr. Peterson is an alternate.
Aha.
Under state law, he is allowed to vote on special permits on an as-needed basis. Unfortunately, he's not allowed to participate in a vote on a subdivision, and so I would prefer that he not make the motion.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right.
You have it here?
So can I share that document then with,
It's right here.
all right, great. For some reason, I can't. April 6th? Okay, I've got it,
The
okay.
plan is April
Yep,
6th.
the plan's April 6th. Do you have it?
Okay.
Okay, so that's all we have to do is refer to that.
Okay, so where are we?
Right.
Oh. Okay,
We are
so-
approving,
So we're approving the modification of the subdivision plan,
reflected on,
revised, reflected on outermost land survey, Clark Engineering, Eastward Homes Business Trust, dated 3/6/23 and 4/5/23.
4/6/23.
I'm sorry, 4/6/23. Eyesight's not that good.
So that is our motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? David? Okay. Thank you. Let us do a roll call vote. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody,
Emily Brody, aye.
Alan Peterson? You're out of here. Greg Chadwick,
Greg Chadwick, aye.
Harry Munns,
Harry Munns, aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Appreciated your input tonight.
Have a good night.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. So this evening, we move on to case PB 2023-07, which has also been continued from 14th of March and the 11th of April. Round Cove Resort owner, LLC, and Four Cove Landing Road owner, LLC, are seeking a site plan review and use special permit for an increase in allowed hotel motel use by more than 7,500 square feet of floor area as required pursuant to the Harwich zoning bylaws, section 325-9 and 325-51. The proposed building expansion is to create additional hotel rooms and to renovate buildings at Wequassett Resort and Golf Club. Property is located at 2173 Route 28, Head of the Bay Resort, map 115, parcel S1-3 in the Commercial Highway 2, CH-2 zoning district. Good evening.
Good evening. For the record, I'm Marion Rose from Singer & Singer in Dennisport.
Yep.
I'm here on behalf of Brown Cove, who's the owner of Wequassett Resort and Golf Club. As you said, we're here for the second time. The first hearing was continued so that members could go to a site visit. Just to recap where we are, I'd like to say that I've got the same crew of characters here. John Bologna is to my right, an engineer from Coastal. We also have Brooke and Albert Core, who are the architects. They're online and will be available to answer any questions. Dave Hawk is a landscape designer. Alton Chung and Josette Willis are the directors and managers of operations here. We are here for both site plan review and a site plan special permit for an increase of over 7,500 square feet in square footage floor area of an allowed use. The project scope is replacing, in the main, 3 single-story structures which are used as a hotel use, with 3 two-story structures, and increasing the overall units by 12 units, 4 in each of the buildings, and the buildings are identical in design. There'll be 1 ADA unit on each structure, and the ADA units will be accessible by the paths that are going to be renovated in this area. No other part of the resort will be affected other than the areas shown. I wanted to make sure and not go over everything that I went through last time and go over special questions that were asked by the board last time. So specifically, and I think the member may not be here tonight, the question was asked, how far is it from the Shelton's house to the proposed buildings A and B? Many of you were on the site, so you could tell that there was quite a distance from the house to the proposed structures A and B, but specifically it's roughly 167 feet from the Shelton's house to building A, and about 145 feet to building B. From the Shelton's house to that bound, which was right on a corner of the patio, it's about 105 feet. And again, just to remind you all, it was super helpful, I think, for you all to be there, because the patio is in part on the Shelton's property, and the patio is 1/3 roughly on the Shelton's land, and 2/3 roughly on the resort's property. That's important because of the next question, which is there adequate screening, and did we discuss screening with the Sheltons? The screening will, as proposed, will be on the same level as the yard of the Sheltons, and in that area, in the patio area, the elevation actually increases. It's higher than the Sheltons' yard. In answer to the question, which is the final question that you all asked at the last meeting, was have we reached out to the Sheltons about screening? And the answer is an emphatic yes, we have. We've done it in many different ways. Dave Hawk, the landscape designer, has reached out to the Sheltons. After the site visit, I reached out to the Sheltons' attorney and asked if there was any desire to discuss the type of tree, the size of trees, the placement of trees. And the answer was, at this time, they were not interested in discussing screening. So what we have done in the interim is design an enhanced screening plan. And you all, I sent copies of that, and I can actually pass out copies of the enhanced screening plan. The Shelton's attorneys have that as well. This is a copy of what you received before.
Right.
And this is a copy of the enhanced landscape plan.
Thank you very much. Oh, great. Thank you.
So we believe that the screening plan that was first initially proposed is adequate to screen the proposed structures. But with the enhanced plan, as you'll see, there are additional significant trees. There are multiple trees that are over 14, or in the range of 14 to 16 feet high. There are 9 trees that are that tall. There are trees that are 12 to 14 feet high, and there are trees that are 10 to 12 feet high. If you look, and I'll mention this briefly, and if there are any questions about how the sketch was designed and how it was developed, Brooke and Albert Core can speak to that if there are any questions. But this is a 2-scale sketch of a perspective sketch on the second page showing what the screening would look like. And this is as planted. It would grow over time. But you can see the perspective of 6 feet, and there's a person in the background. That gives you an idea of the scale of the trees and what is covered and what is screened by the trees, buildings A and B behind the screening. We've discussed in the last meeting concerns about lighting from the abutters. Again, I'd like to just mention things that are added now and new information. We believe there is, I think the concern is for the second floor buildings for A and B, those second floor decks, and perhaps the interior space in terms of lighting. There's a turn down service that's done every night at Wequassett. I happened to be there for a function 2 weeks ago for Cape Cod Community College, and you can see there are plantation shutters or blackout shades. Those are closed every night, sometime between 7 and 9. In terms of the exterior lights, those lights on the rear decks that are on the second floor, as a condition, we would agree to having a timer on those, or a motion sensor or something that would limit it so it wouldn't likely to be on all night. But we believe that the screening is proposed, particularly with this enhanced plan, would take care of that lighting concern. Another concern is noise. And again, we believe that in the main, the resort and the Sheltons would have a similar interest in controlling the noise. The resort doesn't want other members to be disturbed, guests to be disturbed, and they have a process for if there's a complaint, or even if a staff member who is making the rounds notices noise, there's a process to approach the group, let them know that they're disturbing people when that happens. And it doesn't happen all the time, but it does sometimes because it's a resort. There's also the ability to move people who want to do something outside. If they're in a wedding party or something, move them to the interior of the resort, to the fire pits that are on the water. There's a place where you can watch movies closer to the water where you're not near other neighbors. So these are things that the resort is in the habit of doing when it needs to be done. It's not often, but there are options there to deal with noise of that nature. And if there are any concerns or wanting to know exactly how that process works, we have Alton and Josette here to answer that further. Today, I want to mention that today we did hear about additional objections from the Shelton's attorneys, and those may be brought up afterwards, but I'd like to address those now. I haven't had a lot of time to deal with these, but I can tell you there were some assertions that we do disagree with, and we'd like to take the time now to mention those. It's definitely the board's prerogative if you would like to send this to town council, but we believe that that's not necessary. And if you disagree and want to bring this to town council, we'd like to have opportunity to write a letter to explain our position further. But in terms of, I'm not sure if you all have seen that memo from today. Okay, great. There was a focus on whether the current proposed work was on the same site, or if there were two sites, Four Cove Landing and the resort property. We believe that after a planning board decision in 2008, which involved the resort property and Four Cove Landing, at that time, the planning board approved a proposed site plan which said property line to be expunged, the property line between Four Cove Landing and the resort property. We believe since that time, for zoning purposes, the town would treat that overall property, Four Cove Landing and the resort property, as one site. So on that site, there is hotel use and there is a dual family use. The former owners are living in Four Cove Landing. There's a small apartment, it's my understanding, there as well, which they use for guests. And that use has not changed, and we're not proposing that it changes. I think if it did change, we would have to come back to you and ask for that to change. That's not on our agenda for this current hearing. There was a question regarding whether Four Cove Landing, the structure, was included in the site coverage or the building coverage. I've confirmed with John that it was included as in the overall square footage of the combined site. And again, the coverages are conforming. In fact, the building coverage is only, as proposed, 8.4%. Again, I want to emphasize that the two-family dwelling is used as a dwelling. It's not used for a place for family and guests. It's not used for a unit to be rented by the hotel. It's not used that way in the season, and it's not used that way in the off-season. There's no intent to add Four Cove Landing to the resort's group of hotel units at this time. And finally, there was mention of a possible increase in use in the golf cart path. I've again checked with Josette, who's in charge of operations at the resort. That path is used to service Four Cove Landing. It's also used to serve the Mother Goose Cottage, which is on the town landing. It's not used in the service of structures on the traditional resort site. And there's no plan to use it for A and B. In fact, as we were going about the process of designing this renovation, if you look at the paths, you can see that there are lots of turnarounds and there are lots of areas where golf carts could be parked. That was important. We talked to Alton, we talked to Josette, because there are golf carts which are coming from parts of the resort to change, to do the cleaning with these units, to provide room service and that sort of thing. But it's all coming from inside the resort. They're not using Four Cove Landing, that road, to service buildings 1, 2, 3, and whatever now, and they would not be using that to serve buildings A and B or K later. What I'd like to do now is to ask Dave Hawk to come up and to walk us through the enhanced landscape plan. And if there are any questions afterwards, all of the team is here and we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, Dave Hawk, Hawk Design, good evening.
Good evening, thanks for coming in.
It's nice to be here. So, as Marion stated, what we've been charged to do is bolster that buffer. Before, I think we had 8 to 10s, 10 to 12s in there. Now there are actually 12, 14 to 16 foot evergreens, and 5, 12 to 14, and 2, 10 to 12. So, you know, we felt that that would be appropriate in there. We also, because of the existing patio, tried to move things out and give the patio a little breathing room there also. Hence the more pyramidal cryptomeria that we have placed in there. It's the name of the plant. So, you know, again, we have, you know, 10 evergreens, and then we have I believe 6 of the cryptomeria. They're all evergreens, and they're all fairly substantial trees in that area. Shuffle around here a little bit. So the architects that are involved in the project, they were able to put together some computerized sketches that showed the buildings, and we were able then to put in the trees. I did them freehand. I'm not a computer guy. I'm a freehand kind of guy. As Marion had stated previously, you need to get a scale figure in there, a 6-footer, and that usually works to illustrate things much better. So we took that scale figure. You see a gentleman on the right-hand side, and then one by the existing trees to give you an idea where things are. So again, the buildings aren't spotted. They're actually developed from the topography and the existing conditions on the property. And you know, as you know, trees sometimes are a little bit different. They're not like buying doorknobs, but you know, it would be our intent to get the fullest and biggest within those size ranges that we could within those varieties.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions from the board? Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Chadwick.
Are those the additional trees that changed the landscaping, I think you said 12 to 16, some, and 10 to 14 or 8, are those installed in the ground, they're gonna be 16 feet, or do they start at 4 and 10 years from now they're 16 feet?
No, the smallest trees, of which there are 2, as we add in the last, they're 10 to 12 footers. So they're 10, you know, we get in there and we push them to go to 12. You know, usually in the business, they go by a couple feet per jump. So, yeah, they start out at that size, and
At the 10 to 14 or 16?
yeah,
Right, the specifications of
Right.
where they're going to be planted.
right.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Yes, Mr. Munns.
It's unclear, I'm looking at the letter from Ford and Ford, and it's unclear. It looks like they're claiming that part of the footprint of building A and or B would be on on Four Cove Landing. Is that a fact?
That is a fact. It's because, but the property is combined. It was meant to be, the line was meant to be expunged in 2008. The land has to be, I mean, the Four Cove Landing and the resort property had to be owned by the same entity. And we've gone through that. One was, I believe, and don't hold me to this, but I believe that one was in registered in land court and one was recorded. All of that, the land has been taken out of land court. Both properties are recorded land and both properties are owned by Round Cove Resort Owners LLC now. And so everything is ready to have that line expunged. But because the past decision was based in part on having that line expunged for zoning purposes, the land is considered to be one unit.
Apparently, they don't agree.
Right.
So is there some way we can sort that out administratively? Can the assessor's office produce a new plot plan that
Well,
shows
we
that
could
as one
submit-
contiguous piece of property?
We could submit tomorrow, I believe, John. We could submit the 81X plan, and that there's no need to do anything other than record it, and then that will be so.
Well, it just seems though if that could be straightened out, then this objection, if I understand it correctly, would pretty much go away. The objection about the Four Cove Landing being
I
used
believe
for
that's,
something that's not supposed to be used.
I think we probably ought to hear, though, from
But I'm-
Attorney Ford
right.
prior to making any,
All right, thanks.
yes.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think, Counselor, you said at the beginning, I think, that we had suggested at or prior to the site view that perhaps you and the neighbors and their council could get together. And
We
you
have tried.
indicated
We
at
have
the
tried.
start here that you did reach out and there was no interest at that time. Did I hear that correctly?
There's no interest in screening at the time. I don't want to put words
Okay.
in the mouths of my brothers, but that is correct.
So
Alleg-
there was no meeting between the property, the applicants, and the neighbors, and you.
We have attempted to do that, and we have had, Dave Hawk has individually gone to the Shelton's home to discuss that. That did not produce a result. And I have offered, I can't speak directly to the Sheltons, but I have offered through their counsel to take any suggestions they might have for the screening plan to Dave, and the best we're able to incorporate those.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to
Sorry,
clarify what I.
It's a
thought I
little
heard.
awkward, but yes, that's what you heard.
Thanks.
Any further questions?
Mr.
Please.
Chairman.
Yes.
And I know we're going to hear more on this, but just
Certainly.
for clarification, the point of objection is that a property line was supposed to be expunged and then wasn't. Is that the matter at hand?
I'm not sure if that's the matter at hand. That's,
Because my understanding, Wauquasit in general was put together through all different pieces and parts. So there were at one point lots of different property lines, correct?
correct.
Okay, so when we hear from the other side, the point that you're making on your side for clarification is that it was supposed to be done but wasn't finished, almost
Correct.
clerically.
Correct.
Okay, thank you
Correct.
for the clarification.
Yeah, there's an 81X plan that
But that's
John
not-
has prepared,
Right.
and it needs to be recorded, and it has to be, the owners obviously have to be the same owner for that to
And
happen.
an 81X plan basically takes all those property lines and make them.
Erases them.
But right now, that's not in effect.
It's not in effect generally, I think because it was a condition of that decision, for zoning purposes, I believe that it's like, we could not have ignored the requirement to expunge that property line when we were asking for more relief from the boards. So we knew that we were going to need to expunge that line officially when,
But it didn't happen.
but it did not happen
Okay,
before.
so that's where we are.
That's where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any further? So at this time, I'd like to hear from the opposing counsel, if I may. Thank you very much for your presentations.
Sure.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you.
Feel like with opposing counsels tonight that we've got a judicial proceedings underway, and it's like, where are the robes? Come on, let's get the stagecraft right. Oh, yeah.
How are you?
Good to see you, John. Field cards in the assessor's office
As of today.
today, and the top card is for Cove Landing. See, it's listed as two-family. Please note the area
Thank you so much.
is listed at 39,000 square feet.
Thank you, sir.
The third sheet I have is just one of the inn cottages, just to show you that it's listed as a hotel property or an inn property.
So they did not get the Board of Appeals case that you sent later. We did not print that out and hand it off to them.
Okay. We have copies.
I think we can start, though.
Yeah.
Whenever
Very
you-
good. Thank you, Mr. Ford. Delighted to have you here.
I'm gonna pass out.
Oh, you're gonna pass the memo?
No,
Unless they have
I'll tell you
it.
what I'll do.
They have
I'll
it.
pass out the Board of
We
Appeals
received the
case
memo. Yep.
later.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. For the record, Attorney Mike Ford, together with Bill Riley, we represent collectively Dottie and Stan Shelton, who are here this evening, who are immediate abutters to the project. I came to this a little late in the game. I was not at your first hearing. I have had the pleasure of watching it. I was not at the site visit, but what had happened at the site visit was reported to me. I have been to the site. I have been to Round Cove since I was a young lad, and I'm very familiar with the march of progress that is the Wauquasit Inn over all of the years surrounding the harbor. So when the first thing I did when I joined the team was to go and visit Dottie and Stan, get to meet them. And then when I went in their backyard and saw the stakes and walked around, I could immediately see what the issues were and understand their concern. And so after talking to them, the first thing that I did, as I usually do when I get involved in any cases, is there a way that we can all get the yes? And so to that end, I explored the plans. Mr. Riley and I talked. We talked with the Sheltons. We talked with their family. And then we reached out to Attorney Rose and indicated that we would like to meet to discuss possible resolution, perhaps some redesigns of the project, whatever, see if there couldn't be some middle ground. And happy to report to the board that Attorney Rose was very gracious and contacted her clients and got back to us and said yes. And so Mr. Riley and I did go. We met for a couple of hours at her office in Dennis and made a good faith effort to explore options, potential redesigns, whether there was any ability to do anything on it. Unfortunately, I have to report to the board, we couldn't find any common ground. And so, but an effort was made, and I know, Mr. Chadwick, you asked. I think what Attorney Rose was telling you was we were not getting back to her on the screening issue. She's correct on that. My clients thought that it was premature to start talking about what the screening would be if we hadn't had a chance to kind of discuss the overall project and see whether there wasn't some way that we could come to a meeting of the minds on that. And unfortunately, we couldn't reach common ground on that, and as a result of that, I think the Sheltons, with justification, said, we don't want to participate in a screening plan because that just gives an indication we're on board and let's just do the screening and we're all done. So, but I did want you to know that a good faith effort was made by both sides. They invited us, we reached out, we did have a good meeting, but unfortunately there was no common ground that was reached. And as of this evening, there still isn't. I'd be the first one to report something if there was. So as a result of not being able to come to some solution, we decided that it was necessary to take a deep dive on the inn and the applications and kind of put them in perspective from a regulatory standpoint. And so we've done that. I have to tell you that it was a lot of work. The inn, which its first building was built in 1765. I've gone through every one of the buildings. And the ones before you tonight, though, that are principally at issue, all three of those buildings were built in 1967. And notwithstanding the filings that have been made that by the applicant that indicate that, at least to the applicant's knowledge, the inn had not been reviewed previously by the Board of Appeals, but only by the Planning Board. I was able to find through a rundown at the Registry of Deeds and also files here in town, actually I couldn't find this file in town, was that in 1967 there was a permit issued for 30 to 40 hotel motel units and a swimming pool on the land facing Round Cove, and it was granted under a Section 6 finding, which you've heard a little bit about tonight, Chapter 48, Section 6. It was alleged to be pre-existing non-conforming. The inn predated 1952 zoning when it came into Harwich, and as a result, they applied in '67. Were successful. It's a one-page decision, as things were in those days. Leaves a lot to be desired in terms of what was really going to get built, but that seems to be the genesis of the three buildings that's before you tonight, as to how they got there. And other buildings, I believe, were also built under this particular Board of Appeals decision. And I say that I believe it's the three buildings because it matches the date that building and assessing have for these three buildings, which was constructed in 1967. So I then reviewed all the permits, including the 2008 permit that was referred to by council, and because I was most interested in the relationship between the second applicant, if you will, the owner of the two-family structure, which was a co-applicant, Fort Cove Landing Road LLC, because I couldn't understand how that fit into the overall application. And so I did a rundown back on that. I found no zoning permits issued, recorded in the chain of title for that property. And I couldn't find any permits that had been issued to the Wauquasit Inn since it was a corporation in '67, Wauquasit Inn Inc., all the way forward, that in any way dealt with the use of that property. I found a couple of building permits. I found that the house was constructed under a building permit in the '70s, and then I found a building permit in 2014 that added a kitchen, and somehow this became a two-family dwelling. And frankly, I couldn't find any relief to the extent it was needed. I suspect it was, but as to how that became a two-family dwelling, if you will. It exists on about a 38,000 square foot site. The lot's non-conforming. It is a separate lot. Mr. Riley passed out the assessor's maps. It has not been considered part of the resort. It has gone in and out of resort ownership, but ownership doesn't constitute legal use under zoning. We all know that. You can't just buy a piece of property and decide that, well, now we own it, so we're going to make it the same use. So why is that important? It's important for a number of reasons, because then I backed in to the relationship between that piece and the rest of the filing. And what caught my eye on John Bologna's office's plan, the coastal plan, was a couple of the notes And the note said that, one, the area of Four Cove Landing was being used in all the calculations that they were giving to the planning board in the application and on the site plan for the purposes of determining amenity coverage, building coverage, and site coverage. And so I said to myself, well, the area of the lot is now being used as part of the support for the new 3 buildings. So that didn't seem to match up. And then I said to myself, well, what are they doing with the 2-family dwelling? It sits on its own lot. You can't just use its lot area for something else. It's pre-existing non-conforming, because today you need 40,000 square feet of upland. A great percentage of that lot is not upland. It slopes right down to the harbor, and there's a beach on it, salt marsh, and I don't know exactly how much of it is wetland, but clearly the lot is non-conforming. So here we have a non-conforming lot on which there is a 2-family dwelling, the area of which, the upland area of which is being used to calculate the coverage, amenity coverage, site coverage, building coverage for the new 3 buildings. And then there are also, curiously, I found in the papers that they identified that the house on Four Cove Landing does not meet the setback. And I'm saying to myself, what setback? And then I realized they meant it didn't meet a hotel setback, and they call that out. Well, it didn't, because it was a house. It's only 30 feet. The hotel setback is 50 feet. So I'm saying to myself, how do you take a 2-family dwelling that's on its own lot, use up its land area, and use it for something else without getting zoning relief? So if you go to the table of use regulations, we've been told by council that hotel, motel, inn are all allowed in the RH2 district. They are, but only on issuance of a special permit. They're not allowed as of right. So it seemed to me that somewhere along the line, in order to support council's assertion here tonight about the line being expunged, there had to be a finding somewhere, and I couldn't find it in 2008, that this property was granted a special permit to be devoted to hotel use. And if it was, then the structure would have been a hotel use too. You can't have, okay, that lot's gonna be hotel, but we're gonna keep it a 2-family dwelling. I think it's complicated by the fact that somebody has a notice of lease at the Registry of Deeds, has a right to use it. She identified who that is. They continue to use it as a single-family home, and they've got a rental unit in it, and that notice of lease is at the registry, but we really don't know what the particulars are because they don't tell you what the length of the lease is or anything else. I get it, but apparently there's a residential use. The assessor's card says it's residential, it's assessed as a separate lot. Their tax is a separate lot. They pay taxes as if it was a residence, not a hotel or a resort. So I then looked at their application to the Board of Appeals, and the application, as Mr. Munns has pointed out, one of the buildings, Building A, is over this lot line that they're now going to expunge. So then I said to myself, gee, this seems like it's further complicated now, because the Board of Appeals application says that the hotel use is pre-existing non-conforming. These buildings were built in '67, refurbished in 2004. They don't have the benefit of a special permit. So they're pre-existing non-conforming in that to use it for a resort right now, you need a special permit or be pre-existing non-conforming. They don't have a special permit, so I guess they're trying to wash that through the zoning board under the non-conforming section, where structures that are used for non-conforming purposes can be raised, can be replaced on issuance of a special permit. But there's a catch. It says on the same site. Well, one of these buildings is going to be partially on the residential lot. And I'm saying, well, that's not the same site. So none of this seemed to add up to me once I looked at everything through the lens of Four Cove Landing. And so I'm sorry to come at this so late in the game, but there was so much here to look at, frankly, that I almost didn't get a chance to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together, frankly, until the last couple of days and with other things going on. So I apologize for that. The worst thing you can do on a regulatory board is get some letter from somebody the day of. It's even worse when it's counsel. We should know better. I agree, but frankly, we made an attempt to try to resolve this case. It didn't work, so we jumped in it late, did the research, and I apologize for the lateness of getting this all to you. But having said that, to quickly go through the first couple parts of our memo, I think there's some flaws here. First of all, they applied for two things in front of you, so I won't get into the Board of Appeals stuff. They applied for site plan review and for a special permit, and for that you need to find that the project's in compliance with zoning. That's one of the findings. I don't think it is, not the way Four Cove Landing has been used in the calculations and this lot line. And so I think you can deny that, the site plan and special permit application on the basis of that alone. The other thing they applied for, which I found very curious, was they applied for the special permit because they were creating more than 7,500 square feet. And if you go to the bylaw, that special permit is triggered when there is a permitted use, which is going to be, somebody wants to propose of a permitted use more than 7,500 square feet, it turns into a special permit. That's what the bylaw says. So this is not a permitted use, it's a specially permitted use. You need a special permit to conduct this use. And so they needed a special permit anyway. Now, you might say, well, I mean, that's really just a name. It's still a special permit. I agree, they've applied for a special use permit, but I don't understand the 7,500 square feet. That's triggered when you got a permitted use in a district, but you're gonna increase it by 7,500 square feet. That permitted use becomes a special permit. Bylaw is very clear on that. This, as a hotel use or motel use, was already requiring a special permit. So it didn't need the 7,500 square feet to get there. Even below 7,500, it would have taken it. So I was a little confused by that. Having said that, I think the criteria is pretty much similar for either the special use special permit or the special permit for the 7,500 square feet. And that involves, again, an analysis. One, that it's in compliance with zoning. Again, I don't see how you get there when you've utilized Four Cove Landing. And by the way, they just, I found in a rundown at the Registry of Deeds, just conveyed Four Cove Landing after they filed this application with the boards. From Four Cove Landing LLC, they conveyed it into the Round Cove Resort Owner LLC. So it's now all in one ownership. They did that after they filed. I don't think common ownership and an 81X plan expunging a common lot line solves their zoning problem. They still need a special permit for Four Cove Landing area to conduct a hotel use. They've never gotten it. Even if there exists somewhere in some site plan a note that a line's gonna be expunged, that's not equal to a special permit to use that for hotel purposes. And indeed, contrary to what they're suggesting, the facts are, and the assessor's card bears it out, it's been used residentially as a separate lot right up to today. So when you get to that second special permit, I think you have the same problem. What they're proposing by utilizing the lot area and throwing the two-family residential dwelling into the motel unit coverage, which you said they did, I don't see how you can do that. I think that permit needs to be denied on the basis that Four Cove Landing has never been authorized for hotel use. Near as I can tell, that's based on a rundown at the Registry of Deeds and the building files, the assessing files, and what I've been able to look at in permitting files. And I say what I've been able to look at because the 67 permit that I found at the registry, Shayla made her best efforts, as she always does, to try and find the file in the basement. She couldn't find the 67 Board of Appeals file, so we just couldn't get the background from that, nor do I have any plans to show these buildings originally. They are 2,154 square feet. Bill will speak to the criteria on the special permit in terms of the appropriateness of the location and the appropriateness of the effect on the neighborhood. And if you feel you get there. I would suggest, and it was my part of the research, to kind of figure out where this project was from a regulatory basis. And so I think I've figured it out, and I think it's flawed. And I don't think that the special permit applications are properly for you. Now, having said that, being counsel in another town, I know how this works, so I would recommend, if the board has any questions about any of this, that this is a very important question, involves very important issues for the applicant as well as the Sheltons, and really needs to get answered. Because frankly, the neighborhood, and that's your consideration if you ever do get to the special permit on the merits, what is the neighborhood? And frankly, the only single-family home left in the neighborhood that's affected is the Sheltons. But this was always a residential piece. They thought it was a residential piece. It's been used by the same person that has this lease that's recorded at the registry, and as Attorney Rose said, uses it and has an additional unit in it that they rent out. But somehow, I guess the hotel supplies, I don't know whether it's linens or this rooms or whatever, but if you go out there, you'll see that there already is a golf trail that leads right from Round Cove Road across Four Cove Landing back into the hotel itself. It's already in use. And I can't find any permission for any of that either. So that was my part of the research. That was my concern. I apologize for the tardiness of it, but I think that there are serious problems the way this has come forward before the planning board without addressing the whole issue involving the residential piece of all of this, which is Four Cove Landing. Happy to take questions on that part of it if you have any. Bill has some additional comments he'd like to make on the memo.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. Do we have any questions right at this point?
Okay, I'll take the position of summary, okay? So if I understand what you've just said, Four Cove Landing, up to this date, has been treated by the assessor's office, the tax office, as a residential property, correct?
Correct.
It just moved into the new LLC.
The ownership has recently changed. That's correct.
Okay. This was or is the former owner's use, correct?
Right, my understanding is the McLennans have a life estate there.
So the McLennans use this, but your point is because it has never changed usage, that there's a big hole here, correct?
That's correct, because the way your bylaw is written, it's more complex than some bylaws, less complex than others, but so you have sort of a planning board has certain responsibilities, and the zoning board has certain responsibilities.
So we're back to, is this our job or not?
Well, I can tell you, Michael said he didn't want to talk about the zoning stuff. I'll tell you, in my opinion, absolutely a ZBA requirement that they grant a special permit for Four Cove Landing before you can act on this application. That's my opinion.
Okay, that my job as summary is over from this. Harry, I did this on your behalf, okay? So,
Well,
Mr. Chairman, our job may be different than,
Correct.
okay, thank you.
Or-
Harry?
So,
Harry?
So, just to simplify things, if they bifurcated Building K and Building B from this plan, from A, separated, Building A wasn't there, would you have, I didn't see any objections to either Building B or Building K. Do you have any
yeah, so
problems?
there are objections to Building B, if you get to it on the merits. And those would stem from the findings that you need to make under a special permit as to whether it's going to have an adverse effect on the neighborhood, becoming a two-story building, and whether or not it's an appropriate location. As you know, in this area of the inn, the topography is such that it's totally sloping, right down to the harbor. And in order to expand these buildings, the footprint's first by over a third. They're going from 2154 to 3,300 something, and then a full second floor on it. and being built into the coastal bank itself up above. I would, if I was on the planning board, ask myself, given the fact that this harbor is an area of critical environmental concern, is this an appropriate location? They keep saying that they only got 8% building coverage, where a much higher percentage is allowed, 30% or something. Well, there must be another place on the site then, rather than building in the area that's the most sensitive on a bank and taking an old building, 67 building that's only 1 story, and turning it into 2 stories. So there are objections to B, but I thought that there were these threshold problems that affect B and K, frankly, from a calculation standpoint.
Right.
In terms of coverage, amenity coverage, and all those things. Everything's all mixed up.
Yeah, they're
They've got
using-
everything they've utilized for Cove Landing.
They're using the
So-
39,000 square feet allotted to Four Cove Landing Road for all their calculations. And they can't use that because it's a residential use only. Without a special permit, that area can't be used for the hotel use. So, yeah, B and K are also objectionable, aside from the, the imposition
Yeah.
of the second level and the noise problems that the Sheltons are gonna have. And I know Dave Hawk is a master landscape guy. There's still gonna be lights, they're gonna draw curtains. Oh, so when the people come back from having dinner or having a party, they're not gonna open up the curtains and go out on the back deck? They're not gonna have all the lights on inside? Look at the picture, 10 feet of windows, all lit up. This is gonna create a real intrusion on the Shelton's remaining neighborhood. They said, Dottie didn't seem to mind the noise. Well, in the first place, the 1-story buildings weren't a problem because they were 10 feet below, and so any noise just went into the hillside.
Right.
But she did mention to them that when they worked on Rose Cottage, which is, as you stand in their backyard over to the left, cell phone conversations on the deck and just regular conversations in the evening and the lights. And so, and this is, I know it's 167 feet, thanks to the applicant for providing that information. So, if you have, so there are going to be a total of 4 units whose decks are above the level of the backyard of the Shelton property. And, the possibility that none of those decks are gonna be generating noise on a warm summer night. They're not gonna have the TVs playing, they're not gonna have the radios playing. Nobody's having a couple of drinks and dancing on the back deck. The Sheltons are gonna have to live with that. And all right, so, okay, they can't see it, but they can hear it. And they'll be able to sit, in their backyard and read the newspaper, because even though the lights aren't direct, there's still gonna be a lot of light. I mean, that's 10 feet of windows, all lit up. There's gonna be plenty of light for them to read by. Great, when they turn the lights out, all right, now everybody can go to bed. But, there's gonna be a real negative impact on the sole remaining residential property. That's the neighborhood. And I don't think, that they can get around the negative impact. Another thing I wanted to mention, as Michael was going through things, one of the issues we have with the Wauquasit Inn is all the segmented applications. There's never a, here's what we're gonna do, so we're gonna do this. Well, in 2008, we're gonna do this. Well, they didn't do it, really. So now they come back, well, now we're gonna do it. Well, but who was watching, who was making sure the job was done? So I think it's really, really important for the planning board to take control of the development of the inn. Everybody loves the inn. Big taxpayer in town, plenty of jobs, they do good things. But that doesn't give them free rein under the zoning bylaw to do whatever they want, because it's good for them and only bad for the Sheltons. So we think that you should deny the permit, and I think you should deny it tonight, because it doesn't meet, it's not in compliance with the zoning board of appeals, the zoning bylaw, that requires zoning relief before you can act. So,
But to answer your question directly, Mr. Munns, I don't think that the applications are set up the way they currently have been configured for you to act on any of the buildings because of the way it was all utilizing Fort Cove Landing.
Well, I don't think
That's what
that's
I
an
meant to
option
say.
for us tonight, but I was just, in theory, thinking,
Yeah, I know you were. I know you were.
thanks.
All right, so I think then would be a good time to hear from the planner, town planner, Mr. Alkiotis.
Thank you,
If I may?
Mr. Chairman. The first hearing on this was on March 14th. Since that time, the planning board received a letter dated April 18th from attorney Marion Rose, Singer and Singer, with that revised landscape plan, landscape buffer. And the only other correspondence was the letter from Ford and Ford that was submitted at about 2 p.m. this afternoon. Attorney Riley also called me at around 2 and requested a meeting to go over this. And I appreciate that. At 2 o'clock, before a planning board meeting, there were 6 cases, I was going back over all my notes. But I think it would be helpful for me to sit down along with the building commissioner and have these attorneys explain this again to us, pointing to the plan so that we have an understanding of where the lots are and the relationship. Based on what I've heard this evening, it certainly seems as though Attorney Ford has done extensive research on the history of the property and how it's developed over time. These raise some concerning points about whether or not it currently has status conforming with the zoning bylaw. And so that's an issue that I believe we have to discuss with the building commissioner and with town council. And so, similar to the case earlier this evening where we had testimony from opposing counsel, putting the planning board in a position to make a determination of which attorneys are correct in their arguments, I think it would be helpful for the planning board to seek advice of counsel, provide this information, any other information that Attorney Rose would like to submit, and we would send that off to town council and request an opinion.
As long as we get all attorneys involved with full and ample access to both arguments, both sides, I think the town would be best served and the board would be most appreciative if we could get that input. So I'd like to see if we could generate a second motion consonant with the prior event this evening from our motion maker this evening, Mr. Chadwick.
Where's Mary when I need her?
This was supposed to be attached. This is-
Okay.
This is the 1967 zoning decision.
So would we be looking at May 9th as well?
May
If we
9th
were
as
to
well.
Continue?
Let's ask both parties. I mean,
Counselors?
that clears the town meeting
It-
deadline,
it-
which I'm sure it has nothing to do with your day-to-day activities.
Better not go to May 9th.
Yeah, well, May 9th is better for Harwich Town meeting. I start Orleans Town meeting May 8th.
Oh,
So that I may not be available on the 9th.
Okay.
I'll be at town meeting in Orleans, so.
Aha. So do we have a fallback
May
that we can,
23rd is the meeting following the May 9th meeting.
so is that amenable to both parties, the 23rd?
It is for me.
It's okay for us,
I don't know about,
Attorney, okay, good.
that may be more realistic in terms of these opinions from KP. It's just my experience, but
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
May 23rd?
I'd like to make a motion that we continue the hearing for PB 2023-07 to May 23rd. No earlier than 6:30 PM.
A motion and a second. We do have a second. Roll call vote. Ann Tucker?
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody? Alan Peterson? Alan Peterson, aye. Harry Munns? Greg Chadwick? Yeah. Harry Munns?
Greg
Harry
Chadwick.
I'm just going for a majority here. David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could the board take a vote to request advice of counsel on this as well?
Absolutely. I thought that was included in the motion,
Is that in
but
there?
I'll make a motion.
should we amend it and then revote? Was that not?
So you just voted to continue. Did you vote?
Yes, well, let's, to continue and seek counsel.
Okay, I'll
So
say.
can we amend that motion and vote accordingly? Because I thought that's exactly what we were doing as a reiteration of the, right? I mean,
Right.
okay. Unless we want
So
to,
we're good. We don't have to amend
No, not
that
if that was part of it.
continuation.
We're good.
Let's just assume that that will be the course of action, council and building commissioner.
okay, thank you very much. So a couple of head twisters here. So we continue this evening to case number PB 2023-10, Mark and Andrea Toomey, through their agent J. Thaddeus Eldridge, PLS, are seeking a modification of definitive subdivision plan. The application is pursuant to the code of the town of Harwich, section 400-11C, and Mass General Law, chapter 41, subdivision control law. Properties are located at 0 Quinnapoxet Way, Assessor's Map 102, parcels E1-3 and E1-4 in the rural residential RR zoning district.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Kroll.
Attorney William Kroll from Harwich Port with Thad Eldridge from East Southeast Engineering in Chatham. I'm trusting you might be in the mood for maybe a shorter hearing. Not controversial, hopefully. I don't think there's any opposing counsel. Maybe there's enough of us here tonight, but Mr. Riley may come back. Just in any event, short and sweet, this is a application for a modification of a subdivision plan. And our clients, Mr. and Mrs. Toomey, who are seated behind us this evening, are here. And in 2019, this board approved a two-lot subdivision plan. I believe you have a copy of that. And what we're seeking to do this evening is, we have a unique situation where we're creating a panhandle lot with a lot behind it that has 55,000 square feet that will be unbuildable. And we're under contract to sell that to the immediate abutter, and it does not matter to them whether it's buildable or not. So we don't need frontage. We don't need a road. So we're asking to modify the plan with an approval required plan for a panhandle lot, as you can see, that has at least 35 feet of frontage on Long Pond Drive and sufficient area. And it meets the shape factor. All of that's under 22 on the shape factor, and it leaves that lot 2 out back that's 55,000 square feet. So that the Toomeys would end up building a house on lot 1, and that lot out back would remain vacant, unbuildable. We have one less single-family dwelling built in town, and one less driveway. We've met with the building commissioner, Jack Mee, and corresponded with the town planner, and I believe that we're on the same page as far as this is being submitted as an approval required plan by the planning board, because our bylaw and its definitions of a lot panhandle says that it has to be approved, it's an approval by the planning board. It's right in the definition in the bylaw. And then in section 325-18L, it also says the panhandle lots may be approved by the planning board under subdivision control when you meet certain conditions, like the 35 feet and the shape factor and all of that, and have a driveway. So I think we're on the same page with the town planner on that. I will say that Harwich is possibly out of the norm in requiring right now an approval required plan. When John Eidman was here, one of the last things he said to me was, Harwich needs to amend its bylaw to make it easier for panhandle lots and just have an approval not required process, and not have the full board hearing and all of that. But in the meantime, in my opinion, it's still an approval required plan, and I've had two of these pass through this board in the last several years. One was on Queen Anne Road, and the board approved that in 2019, and one was on Bell's Neck Road in West Harwich, and the board approved that, both of them as approval required plans. Same type of situation where one lot was gonna be built on, and then the panhandle out back was also going to be built on. So we have some precedent for the board treating it in that manner. It'd be great if we could, the board, if the town amended the bylaw so that it was an A&R plan. It'd be a lot simpler and easier and cheaper for everybody. But we're dealing with what the bylaw says now, and we're asking the board to approve this panhandle lot, a modification of the existing subdivision to come out with one panhandle lot, which is allowed under our bylaw, and an unbuildable lot out back, with a driveway, a shorter driveway, and just your 16-foot usual 16 by 16 tunnel driveway, not a road paved and all of that. So it's saving the environment in that respect as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Wasn't there also a case on Doan Road just in the last calendar year? Was it comparable, or am I confusing the panhandle? Irrelevant.
There was one on Doan Road that I handled, but it was not.
It wasn't a panhandle with
Right.
landlocked?
We amended the,
It was
it was a two-lot subdivision. I think it came out
Okay.
as a two-lot subdivision.
Mr. Halkiotis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have had a number of email exchanges with the project surveyor, Mr. Eldridge. We are in agreement that the creation of a panhandle lot does require subdivision approval from the planning board. It is unusual. I had trouble understanding it and understanding the reason why that was required. And the initial plan that was submitted as the modification just showed the proposed new lot lines, but didn't show the subdivision that it was modifying. And so I went back and forth with Mr. Eldridge on this. Yesterday, he brought in a plan that did show the current cul-de-sac dashed in, superimposed, and he did show the current existing lot lines as they exist from the 2019 subdivision that the planning board approved. It didn't show the road that was part of that. So that was kind of the refocus of, all right, if this is a modification, you have to clearly show the planning board what you're modifying. And so we got most of the way there with what was submitted yesterday. There is nothing to really look at or comment on for this subdivision plan. There's no right-of-way and there's no roadway. And those are two elements of every subdivision until I got to Harwich. So we may take this up at a later date. There are a lot of planners that don't like panhandle or pork chop lots. And I have some personal experience with one and find that I don't agree. They allow for a home to be built set back from all the houses along the road, and it can create kind of a retreat lot. So having said that, I don't see any reason why the planning board can't take a vote to act on approving this tonight. There's no engineering, there's no drainage, there's no road, there's no clear sight distance. There's nothing that is normally the subject of conversation for a subdivision plan. And so the applicant has requested a series of waivers. I went back and forth on him about asking him to explain what the public benefit was to the waivers. The waiver requests all pertain to the things related to building a road. So those particular sections of the subdivision rules and regulations aren't really applicable because there's no road, there's no right-of-way, there's no inspections, there's no bonds. So I'm going to recommend that the board take a vote to grant those waivers and then take a vote to approve this, because there's really very little there for the planning board and myself to review and comment on.
Okay. Any further comments?
I just have one question.
Yes.
The lot that becomes, that is landlocked, Lot 2 at the 55,000 square foot, that becomes landlocked, and because there is no frontage, there'll never be the ability to build on that. Will there ever be the ability to build on that lot?
When it's merged with an abutting property, then it could be built upon.
Would it become a panhandle lot to that abutter property that?
It's how is the abutter going to build on it? So if an abutter on Courtney were to purchase it and build a house back there, they could, or.
They could.
In this case, it's the farm next door is looking to purchase it.
But because there's no frontage on Courtney, where would they get the frontage from?
Well, in this case, there will be frontage on Long Pond Drive because it will be merged with the abutting property.
So it would become a second panhandle lot?
Well, so it would be merged with a larger lot. And so would building happen back there someday? It could.
Okay.
Or are they going to leave it the way it is? They could. It's another matter for another day.
If I may, then you might have to have, they'd be in front of you, that abutter with a subdivision plan with a road.
Right.
To get out back there.
Okay.
There is a provision in the zoning bylaw that says that you can't have two panhandles side by side.
Right.
I don't know how that would work with two separate property owners in different time periods, but we don't know what would happen with that. There was a note added to the plan that indicates that the lot has no frontage, and so it's as far as we're concerned with this particular application, it's not going to be a buildable lot. However, it could be conveyed and assembled with other land to be developed at a future date.
If I may follow up on that just a bit, I think that the adjoining panhandle provision talks about the panhandles themselves at the road cannot be side by side.
Yeah.
And you wouldn't have that here. The abutter would have to have the panhandle around this lot that's in between.
Okay.
So I think they probably could. So, do you want to say there's never going to be a house out there? You never say never in business.
I hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Bond. So let's entertain a motion for these six waivers, if we may.
Who's got it?
Page 2 of the memorandum from the town planner. I like it. I've got it right here.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion under my PB number.
PB number 2023-10.
3-10, modification of a definitive landmark and Toomey, for the requested waivers of waivers to the requirement of the subdivision land and site plan special permits, Section 11D Performance Guarantee 1 and 2, Section 11F 1 through 5 evidence of satisfactory performance, Section 12A through E Design Standards for new roadways, Section 13(1)(c) Design Standards for new utilities, Section 14A, M, P, and R Required improvements and specifications for construction. And number 6, Section 15A inspections during, A through E inspections during constructions.
I have a motion to have a second. I have a second from Mr. Peterson. We'll do a roll call vote unless there's any comments from Mr. Harris. Seeing him nod, not at all. Ann Tucker.
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody.
Emily Brady, aye.
Alan Peterson.
Alan Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick.
Chadwick, aye.
Harry Munns.
Harry Munns, aye.
David Harris.
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye. Now we just need to have a motion to approve the application, correct? Is that the language we want to use, or approve the modification to the, all right.
Make a motion that we approve the request for modification
2023-10.
2023-10. Mark and Andrea Toomey.
Motion, I have a second. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any further comment? Dave, did you have your hand up?
No.
Okay. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody,
Emily Brady, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Alan Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick,
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Harry Munns,
Harry Munns, aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye.
Did we have a second on that motion? I missed that one.
We had a second from Mr. Peterson.
On both of those? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Okay.
We now move on to the item, case number PB 23-11, continued from the 11th of this month. Paul Sweetser, agent for DeWitt P. Davenport, trustee, is requesting a special permit for a two-family use in order to construct a duplex with a two-bedroom, with two two-bedroom units. I'm getting tongue twisted here today. The application is pursuant to the code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-51N, and Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9. Property is located at 958 Orleans Road, Assessors Map 51, Parcel S9 in the Residential Rural RR zoning district. Good evening, Mr. Sweetser.
Thank you.
How you doing, Paul?
Doing great. Good.
For the record, Paul Sweetser and Christian Davenport. There is a waiver request on this right off the bat, which is, I believe, town planner has addressed that in his memorandum. If I've been watching it tonight, it looks like you addressed those first, so. Yep. If Paul wants to say anything about that, or?
Why don't we hear for your full
Okay.
presentation and narrative, and we'll go from there.
Okay, in front of you, you have just a little over 61,000 square feet, not a little over, 63,000 square feet practically. And you have 54.81 feet of frontage, and you have a proposed two-family dwelling. We're requesting a special permit under 325-51N in order to be able to have the two-family dwelling. That's basically it, in a nutshell.
Okay. And it looks like you have these set up, arranged kind of like as townhouses,
Yes, correct.
or as a townhouse set. And, let's see, we are looking for waivers and the determination. So, Mr. Halkiotis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The applicant has applied for a special permit site plan approval for a two-family house. There are 2 units that are connected by a structure, a roof, I think, and they have requested a waiver from the requirement that an owner reside for more than 6 months. Waivers for compliance, section 400-17A, 1A, signed notarized affidavit by the owner stating that he or she will live in one of the units on a year-round basis. So the board will need to vote on that. I have reviewed the plan and found it to be fine. I didn't find any issues with it. The board will need to take a vote on special permit findings, and those are listed in section 325-51, 1A through D. And the section of the bylaw related to the two-family is section 325-51N, and that has 4 items that the board will need to make findings that this particular application complies with those requirements. And those are listed on pages 2 and 3 of my memo to the board dated April 5th.
Very good. Does the board have any questions? Seems pretty straightforward. Is there any comment from the public? Please address us from the podium, giving your name and address.
My name's Mary Shinkwin, and I live at 954 Orleans Road, which is right next to this property. So we share a 550-foot boundary, so it's going to have an effect on what I see. The best thing about my property is this wooded lot next door, and that they're building on it makes me sad. But I'm just here because if the special permit is granted, I'm asking for a no-touch zone and some fencing and shrubbery to mitigate the visual and noise impacts. And I have the specifics of it right here, and I'd like to give you all.
That would be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Have you been in touch at all with the applicant?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Perhaps they would benefit from a copy too.
Yes, they would.
Thank you.
I talked to John the minute you saw it, and he was good about saying that he wanted it back in property.
Okay.
So that we wouldn't have to look at all the trees cut down there.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
So may I ask Ms. Shinkwin very quickly about, so your no-touch zone, just so I'm trying to get an idea here, is this kind of like a, you get to the microphone, it'd be best for the transcriptions. So you have a rear no-touch zone, and that's it? Or is there a-
Then some along the side, just, it's a short, it's a 10-foot area. And more than that, the no-touch zone there, I would like to have some shrubbery there, just so I don't see the property as I come down towards my house.
Because I'm trying to picture on what you have here as you indicate my view, and I don't.
My view just looks straight at that lot, so I would like to keep as
So
much
is
of
it
that
the,
intact.
so what are the dimensions, just so we understand? It looks like the 958, you're looking at that line as having a certain, there has to be like kind of a dimensional requirement, I would think, if we want to have a zone, it has to have boundaries. So what do you have, what is your, do I see, because it's at 10 feet from the side lot line? I'm just trying to,
Right, in the rear no-touch zone shall begin immediately behind the reserve area shown on the plan, and shall then extend to the rear property line. See that?
so this, when you're saying to the rear, you're saying to the north edge? or-
Yeah, towards the golf course. Because that whole thing slopes down, I don't even, I don't really think they're planning on doing anything back there, but I don't really know, I'm just asking for that.
Right, okay. Have you gentlemen had a chance to take a look and see at this? Does it make sense to you?
I don't know about a restriction on a no-touch zone, but we definitely entertain the idea of some screening, certainly. I don't know about fence, but possibly some live screening with some lealands or evergreens of some type.
Yeah, because I'll just be looking at the back of their house if they take down all the trees, and it's a lot of trees. It's a
Is this
big
amenable
lot.
to you? What
And
the
this
pro-
was just to, if I, I'm sorry.
Please go right ahead.
Part of the layout and why we didn't push the house all the way back was to not disrupt as much on the neighbors, as well as the house on this side. We spent a lot of time, I think I tortured Paul. How many times did I make you redo it?
Yeah.
So we
to pull
tried our,
everything forward, so.
yes.
Yeah, it looks like it's very forward in that they're gonna leave a lot of the back untouched, but I don't know that.
Actually, I'm not sure if you recall, but there's a concrete marker on your property
Yeah.
over here. Okay, and that's forward of your place. Your place is way back here.
Right.
So where we're doing it is, we're gonna be out by that concrete marker. So what you're talking about is screening up in this direction, up in
Well,
here.
and just, are you gonna cut down
There's-
all these trees back
No,
there?
he's not planning on cutting down all those trees,
Great.
no.
All right, good.
So are we in a,
Good zone?
consensus here?
I think
Or
so.
you're, okay.
I mean, as long as, vegetation is fine with me as far as blocking out what I'd see on the back of that house. And if you're gonna leave those trees there, that's great.
Oh, yes, yeah. No, none of this is gonna get, except maybe some dead ones here and there, but other than just cleaning up that's not, there's no plan to
Okay.
mow all that down.
Great, okay.
Thank you, Ms. Shinkwin. I appreciate your patience this evening, in addition to your interest. Yes.
Hi, good evening. Mike Sarajan, 5 John Joseph Road. Actually, the back of my yard abuts their property and
Okay.
faces Ms. Shinkwin's property. So I was just alerted to, just prior to the meeting, of her memo that she gave you about what she just requested. I guess my question was going to be very similar of how much of that property that's currently there in the back would be disturbed, and what's to keep something in the future from being built back there or cleared out. So that was going to be my question to these gentlemen.
Take that to,
This is where you can
Yeah,
say, you own it,
yeah.
you're gonna keep ownership, so.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we don't have any plans as of now to do any clearing there. I don't know why we would in the future. Can't say we might not take a tree or two down, but at the current time, we don't have any plans to do anything down in this area.
right?
And if anybody's ever seen any of the Davenport places around town,
Right.
which there's well over 100 units around town, they are meticulous about keeping everything up.
Right.
It's not so much a question about keeping up the properties. I used to work for the Davenports for years as well, growing up. But the question really is, could that property later be built on? Could another home be built further back on that property at a later point? I don't know if there's enough square footage for that to even be done, but that was really the question that I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board and staff. Richard Waystack of Harwich. I raised tonight to ask you to support the special permit here, and I do so as a housing advocate in this community. Just 3 brief points, if I can. The applicant has been before you before to do a similar type of scenario, and if you drive down Queen Anne Road and you see the quality of the product that they have put out there of 2 basically duplexes, but they're side by side, and of course, what they're doing on Celebration Way up off of Headwaters, they're exceptionally well done. And housing right now is just such a major issue in this community. I did a search tonight at 7:30. Town of Harwich right now, there are 18 properties for sale. The least expensive property right now is $779,000. The most expensive is $10 million. There are 2 for sale under $1 million. It's a huge issue, and there are no rentals in town. And today, anecdotally, a lovely 84-year-old woman came into the office from a generational Harwich family. And she's got kids who are not local, and she came to me because she can no longer afford to live in her house on Route 28 in Harwich. And trying to come up for a solution to get into Pine Oaks, it's a 3 to 7 year wait to get into those units. If she sells her house, she's not going to have enough money to buy a condo. The only real solution for her is a rental. And when I called today, there are no rentals currently available. This housing will add to the housing stock, the rental market, which is so badly needed in this community. And I got to tell you, in seeing what the Davenport companies have done in the last couple of years, adding to the rental stock in this community has been substantial. So I strongly urge you to support this special permit tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Wasak. Hey, what happened to ladies first here?
That's right.
Please, sir.
Last of the gentleman in the room. Good evening. My name is Art Bowden. I'm a housing advocate, and I live in Harwich, and I live at 800 Orleans Road, also known as Route 39. I basically addressing my comments to the letter that you received from the abutters. Well, I live at 800, so I'm somewhat of an abutter. Now, part of their comments, I have to say, is true, particularly about the speeding on Route 39. But the rural country road, that's long gone, okay? And when I read the letter, and I read it 2 or 3 times, I'm saying to myself, there's got to be a different Orleans Road, a second Orleans Road, because this is not the one I live on. The dump trucks, the traffic, I mean, the rescue vehicles that go by continually, day and night. So I just hope that you kind of look at those and put those in where they're supposed to be. I'm a housing advocate, and like I have to say is, I just hate to have to come after Mr. Waystak. He is such a great speaker, but I'll take my chances. We do need rental units in town, and the Davenport company, as far as I know, is the only one building rentals. And from what I see, they do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bowden. Ms. Williams.
Good evening. Cindy Williams, Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber. I'm glad I wrote down my notes at this hour because it's almost past my bedtime.
I thank you for your patience.
No worries. This is worth it. So,
That certainly comes upon a 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. email. Should I come tonight? Yeah, come on. Bring some coffee.
I'm here this evening in support of the project at 958 Orleans Road. Important to note is that we have a proven developer who knows how to handle year-round rentals and has over 100 in Harwich alone. They continue to build beautiful homes that will help with the housing crisis we in Harwich and all over the Cape are in. We have held a number of housing huddles recently and had panelists from our fire department, school system, town, health center, and all state the biggest issue is housing and year-round housing. Some of the people that are looking for housing, as Mr. Waystak just mentioned, are also our healthcare industry who take care of our elderly, who is the majority of our population here in Harwich, our teachers who teach our children, our police and firefighters, and our town employees. Each of the industries and other employees that are year-round are driving from off-Cape. The proposed unit will help with this crisis and will house 2 families. It is a project that is one that we should be embracing and helping to house the future. And in many cases, the children and grandchildren are our present residents who want to stay where they grew up and continue in the community they love and love giving back to. Why would we not support this? We need to start being more YIMBY and less NIMBY. It isn't unattractive, it isn't detrimental to the neighborhood, and this developer also takes care of their properties with a team of maintenance workers and landscapers. As the Executive Director of the Harwich Chamber, I truly hope you will move ahead with this project and help be a solution in our housing crisis. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Williams.
Hello, Elizabeth Harder. I serve on various boards, but I'm speaking as a citizen tonight and begging you to pass this, to support this. And I warning you that I will probably come before you many times to have you support multifamily homes, especially when they're done by Davenport. These are year-round homes. They're not somebody who wants a second home so their kids can come visit. These are well-built, year-round homes. And while affordable housing is incredibly important, we also need diversity of housing. We need every level, from under 80% AMI to over 200% AMI, average median income. And any new housing unit helps, as long as it's year-round. So please support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harder. Anyone else?
I tried to keep my intro short because there was too much legal stuff going on.
Yeah, right. Thank you. We appreciate that, Mr. Sweetser. Do we have any questions further from the board? Mr. Halkiotis?
So the letter that we received goes into detail about requested buffer materials and the kinds of things that should be shown on a plan. We've also had another abutter stand up and I think ask for similar buffering to protect their property. And so what I wanted to do, Mr. Chairman, is recommend that the board vote to continue the hearing, ask the applicant to work with the abutters on a revised plan which shows the location of the fencing and natural vegetative buffer that would be planted to help address the concerns of the two abutters. That could come back to the planning board and clearly show the things that she's requesting. She's also requesting something that's a little bit unusual, a covenant that be recorded. I don't think I think that's unusual and not needed if we have a plan that clearly shows where the rows of buffering are gonna be installed and where the fence is gonna be. So I don't wanna just kind of loosely do this with, oh yeah, just add some trees. I think we need to make sure that it's clearly shown on the plan, and it'd be great to have the applicants work with the neighbor to resolve that. It's not a big deal, so I'm hoping that that could be worked out before our next meeting on May 9th, where the board could wrap this up.
Is that satisfactory to the applicant?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
I'm mostly interested in the covenant, because that would, oh, sorry. I'm mostly interested in the covenant, because that would, down the road, make it, make them unable to take the trees down. So if are you guys willing to work on that as well?
I don't know about doing a covenant. I mean,
agree to that, to be honest with you.
did you have a covenant put on your lot when you
No.
built? No. So if we agree with you, if we're gonna come out and talk to you about
Yeah.
what you want for, you know, your bordering stuff and everything else.
Okay.
Okay, we're willing to do that, but to throw, again, we try to avoid the legalese.
Okay.
So the covenant, as was pointed out by the town planner, that seems like it's a little,
Exotic.
So let me, Mr. Chairman, explain that this is a special permit application, and the law is going to require that a special permit decision and a plan that goes with it be recorded at the Registry of Deeds. That officially, legally memorializes what the planning board has approved, and if the plan shows where there'll be a fence, where there'll be plantings, to provide an evergreen buffer for you, that should be sufficient. The special permit can have conditions that say that in the event that any of the green buffer materials die, they need to be replaced within the next season with something similar or better, just so that that's reinforced by a condition of approval of the special permit. So in effect, it has the same effect as a covenant. It's a special permit decision that has the force of zoning. It's recorded with a plan, and that way everybody understands what's required. So that should satisfy your concern. It's on record at the Registry of Deeds.
Yeah, I'm new to this, so I'm gonna ask questions. So I know.
Please go to the microphone, okay? Just because we're trying to do minutes for
I
these.
said, I was just asking the questions because I'm new to this, so I'm asking how things get enforced in the future. So I'm willing to work with these guys.
Great.
Come up with a plan.
Very good.
Mr. Chairman, Paul, I just want to clarify, you had mentioned a couple times when you just made those suggestions, I'm full agreement that we should continue and pursue those. But you mentioned the word fence a couple times, and I noticed that the fence is in the document, request for the fence. I just want to make sure we're not making a decision and saying you have to go and agree to a fence, or are we?
We can have
And that's
discussions.
part of the conversation already decided when they meet?
Yes, so that goes under the category of what needs to be worked out between the applicant and the neighbors. And John, are you satisfied with that?
Yes, absolutely. I support the project, absolutely. Just, have some questions about the back end of the property, so.
So if you guys can exchange information after the meeting, get together, work that out, you can come back to the office and meet with me. I'd be glad to work with you to get this taken care of so that everybody's happy, which will be like the only case tonight where everyone might be happy.
But we can do something, I mean, we can, so why don't we entertain a motion to continue? I should say, I will entertain one.
Go for it. You've done so well.
You're on fire.
So
Yeah.
well so far.
Okay, May
9.
May 9th acceptable to both parties?
Oh, can't we have it sooner?
Okay, I'm going to make a motion that we continue PB 2023, Paul Sweetser, agent for DeWitt Davenport, until May 9th, no earlier than 6:30 PM.
A motion,
Well, no, I just said, I'm busy on May 9th,
Oh.
but I can send, is it okay if I send
Great.
it instead of me?
of course,
For your designation.
right?
Or we can look at another date if.
Yeah, let's do the 9th, because I feel like we can work something.
Okay.
I think you can.
Fine.
We got some goodwill here. We have a motion, we have a second, we have a second from Mr. Peterson.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Take a roll call vote. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody,
Rudy, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick,
Greg Chadwick, aye?
Harry Munns,
Harry Munns, aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye. I'm sorry this couldn't be more kind of combative. Thank you very much, appreciate it. We'll see you on the 9th.
Actually, we had a lot of people standing up wanting this, so that's good.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, it's,
that is good.
Should have made it a fourplex.
So, yeah, there you go.
I'm stuck.
so our last hearing for the evening is case number PB 2023-13, which is continued until the 23rd of May. This is Douglas Deschen, agent for Kevin S. Tompe and Tara E. Kane Tompe, requesting a special permit in order to construct and maintain a barn and paddock area for 2 horses within the Drinking Water Resource Protection District, DWRPD. The application is pursuant to the Code of the Town of Harwich, Section 325-14E, Section 325-51C, and Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 9. Property is located at 230 Church Street, Assessors Map 98, parcel B3-9 in the residential rural R-R and drinking water resource protection, DWRPD, zoning districts. So, that leaves us with only a vote to approve for minutes and for a covenant release coming up.
Move to continue?
Oh, we have to move to continue, I thought it was already continued, okay. May I have a motion to continue?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call. We could do that quickly, is that all right with you guys? Okay. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody,
Emily Rudy, aye.
Alan Peterson,
Peterson, aye.
Craig Chadwick,
Greg Chadwick, aye.
Harry Munns,
Harry Munns, aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry. Aye. Okey doke. So we have also minutes here that look splendid. Did everybody get a chance to take a look? I didn't see any typos, misspelling names, or anything like that.
Did it misspell it? Did it have an S in that end of Harry Munns?
Yes.
What was it?
I thought I saw one go back.
I mean, unless it was not inconsistently applied. Oh, Harry Munn on March 14th, misspelled.
Okay.
Line 4.
All righty.
How dare you?
Outrageous. Thank you. So amended. Can we have a motion to approve? Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second?
I have a motion? Mr. Peterson, second. Mr. Chadwick. Any further discussion? Gone. Ann Tucker? Emily Brody? Alan Peterson? Greg Chadwick?
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Harry Munns?
Harry Munn's aye.
David Harris?
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry. Very good. Aye. And we have a covenant release requested for PB 2015-12 Arthur's Way, Mark Smith applicant. Mr. Halkiotis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mark Smith is in the process of developing a subdivision called Arthur's Way, the Preserve. Subdivision was approved in 2015. We asked VHB, the Planning Board's consulting engineer, to go out and do a cost to complete estimate. What I got wasn't exactly what I was looking for. I joined an engineer from VHB in doing the inspection of the subdivision. I noticed that during the inspection, looking at the approved plan, that the plan showed a number of existing trees that were intended to be preserved. And this is a copy of the approved plan. And I stopped by on my way home this afternoon just to take a look and verify. I counted up on the approved plan the number of existing mature trees that were intended to be preserved that were called out on the plan. And I came up with approximately 30 trees. These are mature trees, a mix of different varieties. When I stopped by this afternoon, I was trying to verify whether these trees had in fact been preserved. And in some cases, it was hard to tell because the vegetation along the property line, it looked like some of the existing vegetation was in fact preserved, and that included some mature trees. However, it looked like there were others, particularly on the north side of the street, where none were preserved. I wasn't here at the time in 2015 when this was discussed. Preserving this number of existing trees is somewhat unusual. When I talked to Mr. Smith about this, he indicated that when they built the road that he didn't have, he was unaware that they had cut these trees. So we have a cost estimate from VHB that that comes up with an amount of $234,000. Mr. Smith's asking to have the last 2 lots released. They've all but 2 have been released. There are some homes built on the road that are occupied now. The cost to complete estimate, it mentions what is required in the subdivision rules and regulations, which is 150% of the calculated cost. So unfortunately, the water is muddied here in that I don't have an understanding of what's going to happen with the trees that were cut.
Or if there was a rationale for
I've been to a lot of subdivision hearings, and when I see something like this, I can imagine that there was a lot of discussion about preserving these trees. It appears that a lot of them weren't, and the board needs to decide how you want to handle that. In addition, if we're going to ask to have some additional landscaping done, we need to understand that a tree that's 6 or 8 inch caliper takes 25 years to grow. So replacement trees, shade trees that typically go into subdivisions are about 2.5-inch caliper. So there's not an in-kind swap here, unless the board were going to require large specimen trees that replace what was taken out. So the trees that were removed are one issue. The cost estimate from VHB, he doesn't give us what 150% of $234,800 is.
I thought it was 150 that they came up with. Maybe 150% of that, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, may I please ask you to announce yourself and your address? And
Sorry, Mark Smith, Orleans Road, LLC, Arthur's Way. For some reason, I don't know if I was reading it wrong, but I thought it was about 155,000 they had come up with, and we were doing 1.5 times that, which was in the twos, but I could be wrong.
So the letter from VHB says, our view of the cost of worked items left to perform plus a 50% contingency results in an expected cost of $234,800. So I will talk with the consulting engineers about how these cost of completes should be drafted, but it should be an itemized list, number of linear feet of whatever that needs to be installed, and then a cost. And in this format, just makes it more challenging for us to figure out what that bond amount should be. Mr. Smith has indicated that he's going to get a bond from a bonding company, doesn't have a problem with that, and that he's got, some buyers that he wants to convey these lots to, so he needs to get this taken care of so that it can be released, recorded, and he can move forward. So I wanted to just kind of broach that subject about the trees to be preserved, see how the board wants to handle that, and then we can try to figure out the bond cost from there.
can we ask Mr. Smith about the trees, please, at this point? Does this make sense, or is this?
Sure, I mean, yeah. I'm honestly gonna plead a little bit ignorance with that. I wouldn't knowingly have them take down specimen trees, especially if they're in the right places and they weren't in the road. So, kind of putting myself at the mercy of the board here a little bit as far as to replace that with specimen trees would be like, more student loans, because I'm not paying for college, so. I'm happy, as I said to Paul, I'm happy to work with him on this whole landscaping aspect of things and him be the liaison for you guys, and we'll just figure it out.
Okay.
I'm a big landscaping proponent. I've done a couple of, actually, you're talking about affordable projects. I've done Brewster Landing in Brewster. I've done Maritime Landing in Dennis. I'm a big landscaping guy, so I believe in landscaping. I apologize about the specimen trees. Like I said, I do sincerely plead ignorance on that, so if we can make up for it in some other ways with different plantings, I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, if we could make that a condition, can we go ahead with this? Or should we continue and get the line? Should we get the line items? Dave, sorry.
Yeah, my question is, were the trees that were cut down hardwoods or scrub pines, or what type of trees were they?
The plans identify a mix of deciduous and conifers. Basically, the stuff that grows around here, oak trees and pine trees. And so there was a mix of all that. I'm trying to read, it's very small, so I can't really see all of this, but when I was looking at it on my monitor, I was able to clearly count and see what was being proposed. So it is a mix of trees. In a situation like this, I would like to put the onus on the applicant to have someone that works for him go out and verify which trees were cut down that weren't supposed to. So we need to get a handle of how many there are, and I don't feel that should be my responsibility. He should have someone from his development team go out and do that. And then once we know how many oaks and how many pines were removed that were not supposed to be removed, he could go to a landscape supply store and get a cost estimate for what it would cost to replace those trees.
Okay.
And that could be added to the performance bond. So I think that's the kind of step-by-step. I know he's interested in moving this along because he's got some
I've got
buyers.
2 buyers that have been waiting 3 months already for these lots, and I'm happy to add to the performance bond. You know, if you guys want to say, okay, let's throw an extra 50,000 on it, go have at it. I'm okay with that. I just don't want to get delayed. I mean, these people, they've been sitting around waiting, and I do not want to lose them.
Right.
So it's pretty important. I mean, it sounds like a little bit, I'm crying a little bit, but it's real to me, so.
Right, no, I hear you.
Yeah, I don't see it, you know, that it predominantly are very scrubby pines out there, honestly.
Right.
But I'm happy to throw another 50 grand into it, and we'll, you know, we'll address it in a way that's gonna be satisfactory to the board at the end of the day. Or you can keep the bond.
So the cost estimate from VHB that includes a 50% contingency is $234,800. The board can round that up to a number that we think will address this problem. The rules and regulations say it's supposed to be 150% of what the estimated cost is. And it says that without the 50% contingency, the rules and regulations remaining work is $156,500.
What do we want to do? Are you saying take it to 3 or
50 on top of
the 230, 280, 285? Will that get us,
234 and add 50 to it.
right, 284, 285?
I do have a question.
Yeah.
This was originally, the application was 2015? Any idea when the trees were cut down? Was it land cleared back then? Or?
It was several years.
It was.
Yeah, it was several years. We built a few of the houses. The market was just okay, and then we jumped over. I did the project in Dennis, the affordable project, Maritime Landing, which we, took us a couple of years. Then we've been back at this for about a year, and now we're looking to, finish up and do a good job, et cetera, et cetera.
So we're unlikely to find out what those trees were.
Yeah.
Right.
Simply because
I'm happy to be
the people aren't there.
Yeah, I'm happy to be please the board as far as the release of the bond contingent upon you guys being satisfied with what we're proposing, and I can work with Paul on that, or I'll have my guy put something together, and we can work, he can be the liaison for you guys. And you don't have to give me the bond back till the time comes. I think 50 grand's, that's probably a good chunk for that, is my, non-expert opinion, so.
Harry, what you got?
Do we know what, I don't, if it's here, I'm missing it, but we've got 234, contingency, cost of work items left. Do we have an itemized list of what those items are? The cost, the things that make up this 234 or 156 or 84 or 72?
We don't. So this letter from VHB discusses what was found out on the field. It identifies things that need to be finished up, some additional sidewalk, that we found some binder course that was damaged, and the pitch for the final course needs to correct some drainage issues. Sidewalk extended. We found Cape Cod berm that was fairly flat and didn't have the profile that's required. And that was found in some other subdivisions that were inspected recently. So the paving contractor that they're all using isn't doing that right. So the way I've seen these done before is what you described. An itemized list, per unit cost, and then a final times 150%. To move this along, the board could vote to set the bond at like $300,000, and we can work on getting the lot release form signed by the board, and then when he provides the performance bond, I could provide the signed lot release to him for him to record. And that's I guess, the quickest way we could do this, to take care of this tonight. The board could vote to set the bond, and we could prepare the lot release form. You could stop by Town Hall, sign the form. I will hold the form. Mr. Smith comes in with a bond. We look at it. If I need to have town council look at it to make sure it's right, I can do that. And once we're satisfied with that the bond is fine, we can exchange the bond with the signed lot release form. You can go forward and record it at the Registry of Deeds, and then that releases those lots to be able to be built on for a building permit to be issued.
That's satisfactory to you?
Yeah, well, I'm happy with
All
that.
right.
That's very satisfactory to me.
Then why don't we set the bond at 300 and vote accordingly, right? Is that the, yeah, Harry, sorry.
I didn't hear anything in there that would tell us when this remaining work is going to need to be done.
I had basically, and I said it in my letter back to the board, about April 2024. I think is safe. I think it was, I sent the letter to the board about a month ago, so.
And typically, if the trees go in the fall or the winter, we want to see them survive a winter before the bond is released, to make sure that all the plantings, the loam seed all germinates and all that. So we want to make sure everything it can survive at least one winter before the final bond is released.
It's fine with me.
So why don't we do that? Make a motion. How about a motion?
Sounds good. Let's see. Make a motion to, are we approving the request for the covenant release? Or are we amending?
So you are requesting to release
Yes.
lots
Numbers 1 and 8, I believe.
1 and 8?
Yeah, with the contingent upon my getting a bond of $300,000 to you.
Okay, so approve the request, covenant release for lots 1 and 8? Have that correct? Under PB 2015-12 Arthur's Way, Mark Smith applicant, and the applicant will submit a bond for, what did we say, 300? $300,000?
Contingent upon production of the bond and exchange, right? So will that satisfy a motion?
I looked at Paul.
Okay.
Okay.
We have a second from Mr. Peterson. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody, Alan Peterson,
Peterson,
Harry Munns,
Harry Munns.
Aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye.
Craig Chadwick, aye.
Craig Chubb, did I not say? No, did I do it again?
Thank you.
Did I do it again?
Thank you very much.
Well, we got your majority vote or no vote, right?
I appreciate you working with me on that.
Thank you,
I
Mr.
do.
Smith. Appreciate your patience this evening.
Yeah, could have got back to Mendon, Massachusetts.
Oh, my gosh.
No, listen, I'm happy, so. trust me.
Okay,
It's a nice ride.
good. Get some
Hope you can
coffee.
get over the
Java
bridge.
up.
Thank you.
On a timely basis.
Yikes, 9:49.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just have
Please.
2 more minutes to go over town meeting. As you are aware, that we've had some problems posting the planning board meetings. And I sent an email to the board explaining that the meeting on March 28th, we had the continued public hearing for the accessory apartment bylaw amendment. And because the meeting was not, the agenda wasn't posted, any votes taken are not valid, they're legal votes. We had the bylaw amendments reviewed by Amy Questle, Town Council, and she had some recommended changes to the accessory apartment bylaw amendment. There was just the change that deleted the sentence that says that if they are proposing an accessory apartment in an area that has had the municipal sewer system installed, they would need to connect to it. She recommended striking that language. I think that was a jurisdictional overlap between zoning and Board of Health regulations. So the other changes that she recommended were to the solar bylaw. And in that bylaw amendment, I made some technical mistakes in crafting it. There should have been an amendment to the table of use regulations listing these as new uses. We also heard about a recent precedent-setting court case related to solar panels, and I reviewed that case, and she had made some comments that some of the requirements in the bylaw were overly restrictive based on a precedent-setting, I think the Tracer case in Waltham. And so she raised issues that the bylaw might be overly restrictive. So we decided to eliminate most of the solar bylaw that had regulations for accessory commercial solar. However, the section of the bylaw that regulates residential accessory can stay. And that was kind of the target that I was given by the Board of Selectmen to make sure that what we've seen in another neighborhood, wouldn't happen again. So the good news is the residential regulations can go forward to town meeting, but the board needs to vote on that revised version that cut out a good section of the bylaw. I can go back and we can redo this again in the fall or next year at the next town meeting. I want to have a conversation with town council about, for these accessory commercial solar panels, allowing those by right and not by special permit, because I'm concerned that the Attorney General might not allow that. So because of the vote taken on the 28th and because of changes to those two particular bylaw amendments, the board needs to re-vote it. So we were able to schedule a public hearing the day of town meeting, May 1st, next Monday, at 4:30 at this location. It's a public hearing, but we've already been through a few public hearings, accepted a lot of public comments. We may have some additional comments based on these revised bylaw amendments, but I'm not expecting that. I'm anticipating that this would be a brief meeting with these confirmatory votes to recommend to town meeting that these go forward. Any questions on that before I
Is that the
go
here
forward?
or the small meeting room, small hearing room?
It's scheduled for here.
Okay.
When we get to town meeting later that evening, Duncan and I have talked about how we're going to handle the presentations. I've got PowerPoint presentations, fairly brief for each one, and because the planning board's required under state law to give a report to town meeting, I prepared that report. It does have some blanks based on the result of the meeting, the day of town meeting. So if anyone made comments and what the final vote would be are left blank, Duncan can fill those in. He will, I'm not aware of the procedural requirements of who will make the motion, whether that will be someone from the Finance Commission or the Selectmen. There's a motion made to approve these bylaw amendments. As the chairman, Duncan would read the report of the planning board, and then I would give a brief PowerPoint presentation and stand back and be available to answer questions so that we can hopefully wrap these up and get them approved.
Will we all be able to attend 4:30 on Monday?
4:30 on Monday I can't, but I'll be at town meeting.
Okay. So we'll still have a quorum.
We need a quorum, right?
Yep.
All right, looks like we'll have a quorum. So I just wanted to kind of review that with you. It's my first time meeting here, and I wanted the procedure, just kind of walk through that with you. That's all I have for this evening.
Refresh my memory, are they three separate warrant articles, or is it one ABC?
They're three separate articles. The flood zone article, no problems with that, and that should be good to go.
Okay, thanks.
Very good. Well, I want to thank you, Paul and Shayla, for what you're doing. I mean, we're off on a great start this year. I really appreciate everything that you guys are doing. The department is finally firing on all cylinders, and we're having great productive meetings with a lot of content, and it's great. It's great to be back. I feel like we're back in biz where we were like in 2019, kind of like moving through. But I think we did like 50 hearings in 2019. So,
I do have good news for the board that I can't get into right now regarding the update of the comprehensive plan. It's not public information yet, but at the next meeting, I'll be able to give you some good news, hopefully.
great. Any further questions, comments? Yes.
Comment, something that I throw out to the board for a future meeting to have on the agenda, and I know we've talked about this previously, trying to set parameters around when applicants and people have to submit things to get to us. And I understand, I'm not saying that just because of what happened with Mike Ford today, but we seem to be getting a lot of things. I know a while ago, I think it was Bill Stoltz proposed that if we could put a stop date of Thursday prior to the Tuesday meeting, that all materials had to be received by you and to us, that would be helpful.
And
So,
if anything else had to be in public, right, you have to show up. If you want
Right.
to voice your concerns, send an email on Friday, great.
yeah.
It'll be there, but
And even to have something like, I find it uncomfortable to be handed something. I don't want to sit here and read a two-page memo while somebody's speaking at it, too.
Right.
So that's kind of, if there's, I don't know if legally you can tell applicants or lawyers you must submit these things, otherwise you don't get to speak or we don't get to listen to your.
I had that conversation with Attorney Riley at 2:00 today. And I said the deadline was last Thursday, but this is a problem that every planning board faces.
Right.
And, do we tell them, sorry, put that away, we're not even gonna accept it tonight?
Right.
So let's talk some more about it,
I just,
because it's an ongoing problem.
thank you.
all right.
Make a motion
Adjourn.
to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Ann Tucker,
Ann Tucker, aye.
Emily Brody, Alan Peterson, Craig Chadwick,
Chadwick, aye.
Harry Bunz,
Harry Munn's aye.
David Harris,
David Harris, aye.
Duncan Berry, aye. Thank you all so much.
Shayla, do you want us
Thank
to
you. Have a
hold
good
on
night.
to all this since